High-tech alchemy at Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26. A little more faith? Maybe. It really works. William casually took out a book from his shoulder bag and threw it on the bed, then pulled out his wand and pointed it. Fiery alias, become real. He felt that at this moment, a solid connection suddenly formed between him and the book because of the existence spell. Restraining his excitement, William walked out of the room and turned around. The door of the room of requirement had disappeared, but the temporary connection between him and the existence spell had become a little dull, as if the book was located somewhere farther away. But the connection did not disappear. Luma solemn, lights as day, William shouted the spell. I need a bedroom. I need a bedroom. I need a bedroom. After walking 3 circles, the smooth door soon appeared. Pushing it open, William found that it was a very beautifully decorated bedroom with a double bed, wardrobe, bookcase, table and chairs, coffee table and other complete furniture. The bed was covered with a brown silk quilt. On the quilt, a copy of Bathilda Bagshot's A History of Magic shone brightly. The lights were as bright as day. William had a magic workshop from then on. At least that's how he named it. As long as you use the existence spell to remotely control the room through the wall of the room of requirement, you can safely use the exhaustive method to hammer out the combination and function of the rune language. Once they are verified, they can deduce it in reverse, and maybe with a little luck, they can really find the logic of using runes to construct a magic language. William suddenly had a hunch. This was the first time he was looking forward to Thursday's ancient magic class so much. Life at Hogwarts seemed to have really become interesting from today. Why don't we go to the library first? During the holidays, William had read the textbook on ancient magic, but he felt it was really difficult to get started. He felt it necessary to find a rune dictionary or pronunciation or something. Walking down the stairs of the castle, William found that he unconsciously began to hum Dvorak's Ninth Symphony from the New World. It's still the 4th movement, William thought, but he didn't stop. He always liked this melody. But when William was about to walk down the narrow staircase on the 8th floor, he did not expect to hear a long wail from Ron. Oh, no. Damn you staircase. We need to go down. He was already crying. Under William's stunned gaze, the staircase brought him and a black-haired boy to William's eyes. We will definitely be late. Ron kicked the staircase fiercely. Hey, hello. Do you know how to get to the staircase? We are going to Transfiguration class, but we can't find the way down. The other boy turned around and saw William. He scratched his head embarrassedly, his short black hair spread out, revealing a lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. Harry Potter. Mr. Savior. If I remember correctly, the Transfiguration classroom is on the 2nd floor of the castle. Penelope told William yesterday that the Transfiguration classroom was not far from Professor McGonagall's office, but he really couldn't imagine how they got lost on the 8th floor. Brother, you must know the way, right? Ron turned around after hearing Harry's words and saw William, as if he saw a savior who had fallen from the sky. The spell you told us made me not nervous at all when I was sorted. I dare say that the hat must have seen this and sorted me into Gryffindor. You must know a spell to make the stairs obedient. He used his fingers to make the action of waving a wand. Harry also looked at William. This miserable scene seemed familiar to him. I can take you down. The route of the stairs here is not difficult. But if your Transfiguration class is the first class in the afternoon, I'm afraid you will be late. William walked up the magic stairs and led them from the 8th floor back to the break connecting the 7th floor. Last time, he was led by the Phoenix and wandered around these stairs. He had to ask those unreliable portraits for directions, but now he was familiar with it. But he didn't want to take the stairs at all. William was very curious. Oh, no. Professor McGonagall will kill us. Ron held his head in his hands and shook it like a rattle. Well, if you say so, there must be a way, right? Harry keenly noticed the key. Yes, I mean if you are not afraid of heights, and you are lucky enough not to be caught by Filch, and if you have a little faith, it will be even better. William smiled. To be honest, he wanted to do this when he came to the castle last time, but he was followed by the turkey at that time, and he had not yet entered school, so he didn't want to expose himself too early. Of course, anything is fine. Ron and Harry looked at each other and nodded in agreement. William stood at the edge of the stairs, where he could see the atrium on the 1st floor of the castle. He did not see Filch, or anyone who had threatened this little adventure. The two little lions were watching intently. He suddenly took a step forward. "Oh my God! Be careful," Ron shouted loudly, and ran to catch up and grab him, but William had already jumped straight down from the edge of the stairs and disappeared from their sight. "He can't be that high," Harry swallowed and said worriedly. "No way, this is Hogwarts." Ron shuddered and didn't dare to think about it. They looked at each other in horror and suddenly heard the sound of a spell. William shouted clearly, "Arresto momentum." After another 2 or 3 seconds, William appeared in front of them again. From the broken stairs, he stepped up step by step on the air and stood in the air. "Like a fairy in the lake," Harry whispered. "Who is the fairy in the lake?" Ron scratched his head, confused. But he soon lost interest in asking. "Who'll go first?" William asked with a smile. In their eyes, he was like a devil. William could almost hear the gulp sound of the two of them swallowing their saliva. This feeling of teasing the protagonist of a movie gave him a very novel experience. "Dude, I think if we run faster, we will definitely make it." "Right," Ron looked at Harry. "Yes, there is no need to do this," Harry said, but took 2 steps and looked at the atrium below tentatively. It was really high here. If he fell down, there was no doubt that this height would be enough to break his 2 legs into 4. But he felt an inexplicable excitement. "But we are really about to make it, aren't we?" Harry said suddenly. "You won't really. For Merlin's sake, we will definitely die." Ron shook his head like a rattle, "and he always said we instead of you." "Or do you want to be turned into a watch by Professor McGonagall?" Harry asked Ron suddenly. This was obviously a reasonable suspicion that could happen and was a matter of life and death. "Okay." Ron finally agreed. Or surrendered. In the novel version, Ron took the wrong route in the first week and ran to the 4th floor corridor, where he was scolded by Filch. In the movie version, they were late for the first Transfiguration class, the first class in the afternoon, because they didn't understand the stairs. Chapter 27 Mr. Snape. If you've thought it through, you can just jump down. William raised his wand. The slow stop spell is not difficult. It's not difficult to release it at close range, even if 3 are maintained at the same time, but he had to make sure it was foolproof. Otherwise, the story of the big 3 might not even begin before 1 or 2 of them are missing. Harry closed his eyes and took a step forward. At first, he felt his body falling rapidly, but then a strong force suddenly supported him. Harry took a tentative step forward, and then another. This feeling of stepping on the air without any support was very strange, reminding him of the spacewalk mentioned on the TV show when he secretly watched Dolly watching TV. "Hey, this is amazing," Ron shouted loudly. He took a breaststroke posture and crawled diagonally downward. The action looked very funny. "Colloportus," William pointed his wand at the 2 of them, shouted the spell, and a silver ribbon appeared, tied the 2 of them together, and tied a knot. "No, wait." Watching his movements, Harry suddenly felt an ominous premonition from the bottom of his heart. It turned out that his idea was correct. "Expulso," William pointed his wand upwards and shouted a spell. A red light shot out with powerful kinetic energy. They turned into meteors. "Arresto momentum." Almost at the moment before they were about to hit the ground, William finally shouted the spell. He often traveled like this when he was in Ilvermorny. The deceleration spell was very popular there. Its function was to allow the objects affected by the spell to temporarily get rid of the constraints of inertia. Each quaffle was cast with a spell, so that even if they fell from the hands of the chasers, they would not fall to the ground immediately, but could float slowly in the air. The wizard who invented this spell was a Quidditch fanatic. He successfully used this method to effectively avoid the embarrassing situation that the players had to stop temporarily and pick up the ball from the ground, and ordinary people no longer had to worry about being hit on the head by the ball falling from the sky. Merlin's beard. "I thought the castle banned flying brooms for the safety of others," Ron said as his feet finally touched the ground. In a short time, he experienced his first flying without a broom and his first forced landing without a broom. The weightlessness of the rapid landing just now made him a little uncomfortable. Harry's situation was much better than his, and he recovered in a moment. He pulled Ron's sleeve hard and pulled him up. "SHH," Harry whispered to Ron, secretly pointing in front of him. Ron looked up and his heart sank. What a coincidence. What a fucking coincidence. Professor Flitwick of the Charms class and Professor Snape of the Potions class were standing leisurely at the door at this moment. They just came out of the hall. "It's a beautiful spell. If you didn't cast it here, But in my class, I think I would definitely give you 5 points, Professor Flitwick said with a smile. He walked over and patted William's arm. But Snape's sallow face was gloomy and frightening, and he spoke word by word. On the first day after arriving at Hogwarts, he started to break the school rules. Buffalo from Ilvermorny. Let me see, there's also Mr. Savior Star and his Weasley friends. The words were like venom, and it was obvious that he was in a bad mood at the moment, perhaps a certain Mr. Buffalo present also contributed a small part to it. A tiny and insignificant small part. Snape stared at them fiercely, his eyes like a venomous snake, patrolling back and forth on William and Harry, as if considering which prey to start with first. Deduct 15 points from Ravenclaw, because Mr. Buffalo is willful, reckless, and arrogant. And deduct 30 points from Gryffindor. Because of Potter and his friends, when mentioning Gryffindor, he seemed to wish to deduct 100 points at once. This was obviously a revenge. William was sure that even the strictest Professor McGonagall would not deduct points so rudely. Hearing Snape's words, Harry and Ron immediately became panicked. The first class hasn't started yet, and they have already deducted 30 points for their own house. But Professor Snape, Mr. Filch only said not to cast magic casually in the corridor, not an absolute prohibition, and I am sure I won't make any mistakes. It was I who asked Mr. Potter and Mr. Weasley to come down with me in this way, so that they wouldn't miss the first class. You can only deduct my points, William replied, frowning slightly. His words made Harry and Ron look at William in surprise but expectantly. In Hogwarts, not everyone dared to talk back to Snape. Especially when he was in a bad mood. William didn't care about this house point, no matter how much Snape deducted, he could always earn more as long as he wanted, but Harry and Ron were dragged into it. Then Ravenclaw will deduct another 15 points because Mr. Buffalo was disrespectful to his elders. Snape's face became even longer, as if he had never expected that William would dare to rebel against him. You two, don't you have classes to go to? Are you waiting for me to transform you into brooms? He looked at Harry and Ron. Harry wanted to insist, but Ron quickly dragged him around and ran towards the transfiguration classroom. As for you, Mr. Buffalo, do you have any valuable opinions to express? With a barely audible snort, Snape saw the two of them running away, and turned his eyes back to William and said, "No, Mr. Snape. Not now." William spread his hands as a statement. But he stared at Snape without giving in, and his tone was particularly heavy when he mentioned now. "Then you should call me Professor Snape. I sincerely hope that your performance in the afternoon class will not be much worse than the spells you want to show off. The potions class at Hogwarts is not something that everyone can perfunctorily do." Mr. Buffalo from Ilvermorny. Snape obviously understood William's hint. When he said hope, his tone was also stiff. After he finished speaking, he nodded to Professor Flitwick, who had been watching them silently, and then he threw off the back of his wizard robe and strode towards the passage leading to the underground of the castle. "I'm sorry, Professor Flitwick," William apologized to his own dean. Not for performing magic, but for the deduction of house points. Although William was 100% sure that he could earn back these points tomorrow, the points were still deducted. "It doesn't matter. I think you have learned a lesson yourself, right? I believe that you will win back these house points, even if it is just for your own dignity." Professor Flitwick smiled and replied, "Like a qualified Ravenclaw, like a qualified Ravenclaw." William nodded. "To be honest, when Professor Kettleburn recommended you to me, I didn't think it was a suitable choice. Quick reaction and skilled spell skills are only part of the duel. Even a not very important part." He patted William's arm. William listened in confusion. "But your performance just now makes me think that maybe you really have the talent to become a duelist. So, although generally speaking, my duel club is only open to students with alias certificates, I think you would be willing to try to visit an event. Thanks to Aspirin for the reward. Thanks to Kukulkan1 for the reward. Thanks to Bookfriend 201,707,211,205,885 for the monthly ticket. Chapter 28. Take that smug smile off your face, Mr. Buffalo. Although my dueling club is usually only open to students with ALS, I think you would like to try to participate in an event. Professor Flitwick's invitation surprised William. He had never heard of such a dueling club in Hogwarts, and he never thought he would be invited. Although he was short, always smiling, and loved by students, Professor Flitwick was an absolute dueling champion when he was young, and his skills and spells were probably unmatched in the entire wizarding world. There are rumors that he even has some goblin blood. No doubt, Professor, William accepted the invitation without hesitation. For quite a long time, his spell skills had not improved substantially, and William had a thorny problem to solve. He found that when he used spells that required emotional drive, whether it was black magic or white magic, the power was very limited. William searched through the library of Ilvermorny for this, whether it was the allowed area or the forbidden book area limited to professors and headmasters, but he did not get a suitable answer. The name of my club is Silver Lance. Perhaps you have heard of Silver Spear? Of course, that is not important. The first event of this semester will be next Friday. I will write to you in advance to let you know the location. Professor Flitwick was very proud when he mentioned the club. I believe that before the event begins, you will be willing to put an end to today's story. Professor Flitwick nodded. Of course, William also nodded. Although his first potion class is about to begin, Snape will undoubtedly target him and set difficulties, but in terms of potions, although Snape is a genius in this field in the original book and has more time and accumulation, William really doesn't think he will lose much. I have the best mentor and weapon. Patting the shoulder bag he always carried with him, William felt full of confidence. During the 3 years in Ilvermorny, the 2 courses he spent the most energy on were spells and potions, and he also received a lot of unexpected help. You know, Heisenberg is a potion master praised by the International Alchemist Weekly. He is a potion maniac known for breaking through the wizard's framework and making good use of Muggle equipment. Even in terms of pharmacology, he has been highly praised by that old bastard Hermes as now considered to be acceptable. After finally confirming that there was nothing wrong with the things in the shoulder bag, William came to the potion classroom in the basement early. It was much colder than the main building of the castle. There were many glass containers along the wall, and various biological specimens were placed in the light green preservatives inside. Hi, Penelope also came to the classroom early. While there were not many people in the classroom, William whispered to her about the conflict just now and Professor Flitwick's invitation to him to join the duel club. Professor Flitwick's dueling club? The previous student president mentioned it, but he usually only considers applications from 5th year and above, and I heard that the admission criteria are very strict. However, most of the club members later achieved excellent results in newts, and many of them joined the Ministry of Magic, and even became aurors. Penelope casually combed her long hair that fell on her forehead. She said with envy, but if I were you, I would definitely prepare before going, because even if you get Flitwick's invitation, other members of the club may not agree. She sat closer and reminded William. You know, Robert wanted to apply to join the club last year, and Professor Flitwick agreed, but he only participated in one event and then withdrew. He never wanted to tell us the reason, but, her breath sprayed on William's cheek. Hot. He was defeated badly. William understood her hint. They took this class with Hufflepuff, and while they were chatting, other people arrived in the classroom one after another. But it was not until a second before the bell rang that Snape suddenly appeared at the door of the classroom. He was wearing a wizard robe that had not been washed for who knows how long, and his face seemed to be even more sallow and impatient because of his bad mood. Snape's black eyes looked around the classroom. It seems that none of you are stupid enough to be late. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, as if in Snape's eyes, this was already a smile. You are already in the 4th grade. I don't think I need to emphasize that you are here to learn the precise craft of preparing potions. If the knowledge of the past 3 years has penetrated even half an inch into your brain, Snape spoke. His voice was only half a decibel higher than the whisper in the ear, but no one present dared to miss even half a word. Unlike some schools in faraway places, in my classroom, you don't need to wave your wand foolishly and turn red in the face to make the potion in the pot work. But I can understand the arrogant thoughts of those people, because they don't know and have never seen the exquisite skills of potion, and they have no way of understanding how much effort and time a wizard needs to put in to brew a pot of excellent potion. They should learn to respect it. He paused briefly. William knew that he meant something. Can you report my ID card? Thinking casually, William quietly waited for Snape to show his identity. He would definitely make a move. In the first year, I promised to teach you how to improve your reputation, brew glory, and even prevent death, and starting from this year's course, I will start to fulfill them one by one. The premises. Snape pursed his lips and stopped. Mr. Buffalo. Tell me, I want to adjust the broad-spectrum antidote to a special antidote for snake venom. How should I operate? His eyes suddenly became sharp and dangerous. Professor, this is unfair. The antidote to poison is something that we only start to learn in the 6th grade. The formula of the broad-spectrum antidote is not recorded in the textbook. Penelope raised her hand and protested to Snape. Mr. Buffalo, tell me, or are you willing to finally and honestly admit your ignorance? Snape ignored her. William patted her shoulder. He wanted to signal Penelope not to be nervous. No need to adjust. The types of snake venom are complex and diverse. The broad-spectrum antidote already includes unicorn horn and bezoar, but the best way is always to find the snake's gallbladder. Adding a small amount of milk thistle can help the patient last longer before finding the type of snake venom. Adding 15 grams of unicorn horn powder and parasite berry concentrate in a strict ratio of 1:5 can help dissolve the curse in the snake venom of magical creatures, and grinding the roots of the devil's weeping vine and adding it can dissolve the paralysis of snake venom. William stood up and looked Snape in the eyes and answered. This was a trap question. But his answer was impeccable. Although William did not describe the materials in units such as portions, handfuls, pinch, or roots as in the textbook, but instead used grams, even Snape had to admit that his answer was correct. Not only was it correct, but it was also ill-intentioned. Humph, you're not hopelessly stupid. So tell me, if I ask you to make a dose of sobering potion in half an hour, what should you do? Snape's lips opened and closed, asking the second question. But this was also a trap question. The formula of the sobering potion was a third-grade content. If you follow the formula, the long stewing time will take at least 40 minutes, but if you adjust the formula in the textbook it will inevitably affect the effect of the potion, or bring serious side effects to the sobering potion. The doctors of St. Mungo's once spent a lot of energy trying to develop a formula for preparing a quick-acting sobering potion, or find a way to neutralize the side effects of boiling the sobering potion too quickly. But how to purify the wolfsbane aconite as the core raw material and balance it with the other two materials, snake teeth and insect needles, has never been solved. But Snape's question was asked to the wrong person. William's last article as Heisenberg was about an efficient preparation method for a sobering agent. The International Alchemist Weekly specially published a special issue for this purpose. Take 30 grams of snake tooth powder and 18 grams of dry billywig insect needles, mix them. Add 200 milliliters of universal solution, and put them into a wall breaker at maximum power to break them. Take out the mixture, put it into a crucible to heat it, and pour in 5 grams of high-purity extract of Aconitum chamejasm prepared in advance. Do you need me to teach you the rest or how to prepare the extract, Professor? Reciting the contents of the journal word for word, William spread his hands and looked at Snape provocatively. Although a suitable ointment needs to be prepared later to soak this improved sobering agent, reduce its effects and side effects to an acceptable level, and play an important preservative role. But even after doing all this, William will play another game of wizard chess and then slowly walk back to the classroom, and he may not be able to use the required 30 minutes. Snape's black eyes are as deep as a black hole. It wanted to devour the brown eyes, and William as well. But the brown did not give in. The whole classroom was silent. Everyone held their breath, watching this fight between gods. Buffalo, you are very good. Obviously you have read some of that guy's articles. But Heisenberg's wisdom and madness are not capital for you to underestimate the potion class. The voice was almost squeezed out from between teeth. It takes a lot of time to mix the snake tooth powder and insect needles to make the sobering agent. When the potion turns into a clear green color, you can add the wolfsbane aconite. Otherwise the other ingredients in the aconite will affect the effect of the finished potion. Heisenberg just accelerated the process by extracting the liquid, and borrowed some toys to reduce the time of soaking, but it will also make the potion too strong and cannot be used directly, Snape said dryly. He did not admit defeat. In his opinion, William was just taking a shortcut and had read the report. Even Snape himself had to admit that he probably couldn't continue asking. William couldn't answer, which made him look too obviously making things difficult, and if he answered by chance, the situation would be even worse. Why didn't you write down what I said? Snape finally moved his eyes away from William, and said with a fierce look across the classroom. Do you think you are stronger than Mr. Buffalo, or myself? There was a rustling sound of groping for pens and paper in the classroom, and everyone, including William himself, was recording Snape's words. Although he won the game on the field, William had to admit that Snape was worthy of being Snape. Just through his technique, he could easily analyze the principle of William's preparation of the potion and the shortcomings of the finished product. You know, William himself got this formula with the guidance of Hermes and countless trial and error. After what seemed like a long time, or just a moment, William suddenly heard Snape say in a very low and very reluctant voice, 5 points for Ravenclaw, and, put away that smug smile on your face, Mr. Buffalo, a 3.5k word chapter. Congratulations to Fafafa for being the first helmsman. Thanks to the reward from the paranoid wanderer. In the original book, Harry and his friends took the potions class together with Slytherin, so the remaining two naturally made up a pair. Chapter 29 Changing World Lines. Have you heard? William, the transfer student from America, is in Snape's class today. How is that possible? Are all American wizards so good at potions? Snape actually gave him extra points. He's just good at making potions. They say that William is actually not that good at anything. He only answered the questions correctly by reading a magazine and memorizing the contents. Marcus and Montague swore that he secretly cast a spell on them because they wanted to tell him a little about life in Hogwarts. During dinner, there were constant whispers in William's ears. Many people were pointing fingers at him. But when he looked over, they all pretended that nothing had happened. You are famous, the Prince of Potions from America, Snape's nemesis, the genius of the New World, and... Let me think about it. Penelope counted on her fingers, pretending to want to count the strange and embarrassing nicknames William suddenly got one by one. Please spare me. They all said it as if the matter was over. William pressed down her finger with his wand and said baldly, although the petty Snape gave him extra points, he obviously increased the difficulty of the entire potion class and kept setting obstacles for him. I think a potion genius like Mr. Buffalo naturally doesn't need to be in a group with others to complete the homework. Miss Clearwater, why don't you go to a group with Miss Melody? Snape not only didn't let William form a group with others, but also basically hung around him the whole time, not letting go of even the smallest mistakes. If there was really no obvious mistake, he would ask William to answer the principle of a certain step. If William hadn't moved out the entire set of chemical equipment he used in the United States, and had never relaxed his requirements for potion theory, I'm afraid that before the end of the get out of class, the 5 points added by Snape would have been deducted for various reasons. But even so, he was still deducted 2 points. The reason was that William was not able to accurately answer the dosage of valerian needed for the potion, even though the textbook said 2 handfuls. You didn't make any mistakes even though he targeted you like this. That's what makes you great. Penelope glanced at William. She took out a newspaper and spread it on the table. William saw the big headline facing him, which read Ministry of Magic refuses to disclose clues to the investigation of the July 31st Gringotts invasion case, suspected to be related to its internal staff. A wizard with neatly combed short gray hair was pushing away the reporter who was blocking his way. Who would have thought? They all say Gringotts is the safest place in the world besides Hogwarts. But no matter who did it, he didn't get anything valuable, Penelope said, noticing William's gaze. But as a time traveler, William naturally knew who did it. The man was sitting in the teacher's seat, enjoying a delicious cream-stewed veal. It seemed that just giving Quirrell a shot of Avada or finding a car 98K and shooting him out of the blue would be a good choice. But that would not only draw more attention to William himself and add more uncertainty to his life, but would also have no real benefit. Moreover, to some extent, he was still half a fan of William's books, half in the literal sense. What's really worrying is here. Penelope pointed to a piece of news she had just read. Dark wizards attacked a Muggle church, injuring more than a dozen people and then escaping. Following her finger, William saw a small piece of text at the end of the news. It is reported that this attack is the second attack on Muggles this month, all of which took place in churches. In addition, many Muggle churches have been damaged by black magic. Barty Crouch, director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement of the Ministry of Magic, urges all readers of the Daily Prophet to contact the Ministry of Magic in a timely manner if they have any clues related to the case, so as to avoid more tragedies. This is undoubtedly a tragedy that William had no impression of in the original book, and it seemed to be specifically aimed at the world of ordinary people. The world line seemed to have changed. Maybe it happened in the original world, but it was solved by the Aurors later. William tried to comfort himself. But to be honest, according to the original British magic environment, the dark wizards in the past were suppressed by Dumbledore, so how could they dare to do such blatant things? Do you think they are looking for something? Penelope poked William's elbow. What? William looked at her. This group of people. They always target churches and destroy many empty churches. Do you think they are actually looking for something? Penelope proposed an idea. Is there anything worth their risk? William also felt that her statement had a certain possibility. There are indeed many magical things in this world, and many of them are kept in the hands of ordinary people. When he was in the United States, William saw a horn that the Indians believed in. It is said that as long as it is blown, the spirit of that tribe can be summoned. But later, it was proved that it was actually just the magic wand of the shaman of that tribe at that time. When he was young, the shaman once went on an adventure with a thunderbird and formed a deep friendship. Whenever the horn was blown, the thunderbird would follow the sound and come to find its partner. Although the enchanted props may be useful, it must have important value for these dark wizards to risk being surrounded by the horrors of the Ministry of Magic and even attracting Dumbledore to find them. Extremely important value. And these people seem to have emerged from the soil. It can't be that Quirrell and 1/7 of the Dark Devil pulled out half of his teeth, planted them in the ground, and they grew up the next day? No matter what, as long as Professor Dumbledore comes forward, it will definitely be solved smoothly. Penelope comforted William, and it seemed to comfort herself. She threw the Daily Prophet aside and turned to attack the ketchup beans in front of her. William also temporarily put aside his thoughts. A burst of cheers suddenly broke out at the long table of Gryffindor. Cheers to Harry Potter and Ron, brave Gryffindor. Perhaps because being targeted by Snape was commonplace, the little lions didn't seem to take the 30 points deducted as a big deal. Instead, they thought that it was very brave for Harry and Ron, two first-year students, to jump from such a high place. Ron was loudly describing the adventure for who knows how many versions, waving his arms and posing the action of waving a wand to accompany the explanation. He undoubtedly enjoyed the feeling of being watched by everyone. In his version of the epic, William had disappeared. And it was him who waved the wand and released a forbidden spell that was not allowed to be named. They even had a fight with Snape after landing. You have to hide that spell, otherwise Madame Pomfrey in the infirmary might be very distressed, Penelope pointed over there teasingly. On the long table of Gryffindor. Noticing William's gaze, many people waved at him vigorously, among which two red-haired ones were particularly strong, naturally Fred and George. Believe me, if they walked to the edge of the stairs by themselves, they would not dare to really try. It has nothing to do with courage and spells, William shook his head and replied. A leap of faith requires more than just faith. They finished dinner quickly, Penelope went to the library, and William went to his magic workshop. Before coming to Hogwarts, he bought a lot of electrical appliances. Thanks to Kukulkan won for the reward. Requesting one monthly ticket, 99 tickets are too uncomfortable for my obsessive-compulsive disorder. Chapter 30 Unexpected Encounter. William clearly remembered that electrical appliances and other tools from the ordinary world could not be used in Hogwarts. But to what extent? He always believed in the saying talking about toxicity without considering the dosage is just hooliganism, and even magic should not be a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not that unreasonable. It's simply because William can hardly imagine how the four giants thousands of years ago could destroy all the electrical appliances and instruments in the castle. First, it's a hand-crank generator. William connected the hand-crank generator to the lamp he bought specifically for testing, and quickly shook the short rod. Soon he saw that the lamp began to emit a bright and stable light. To be honest, this success was too smooth, and William was unable to do it. Then try something else. He took out a phonograph, put the record on it, and connected it to the generator. After a very short wait, the melodious melody of Dvorak's Ninth Symphony from the New World began to echo in the room of requirement. What's going on? William felt confused. Originally, he thought that it was an iron rule that electrical appliances could not be used in Hogwarts, which was why he was so cautious. If it was because Hogwarts was not connected to the power supply, he would dare to order a diesel generator tomorrow and modernize the dormitory the day after tomorrow. The melody of From the New World continued, starting with a melodious flute solo, leading to a relaxed melody, which seemed to symbolize that everything in the New World was thriving. A clang sound suddenly rang out. The melody stopped abruptly, and the poor phonograph suddenly made a long, heart-pounding, sharp sound like a nail scratching a blackboard. Just before William could react, the motor of the hand-crank generator suddenly burst into dazzling electric light, and it was about to bite his finger like a venomous snake. Fortunately, at the critical moment, a transparent barrier suddenly appeared in front of William and blocked the electric light for him. He had cast a protective spell on the Gordian knot, which would automatically activate when it sensed an attack. Although the strength of the protection was very limited and it was easy to be accidentally triggered, it was superior in that it reacted extremely quickly. But the electrical appliances were not as lucky as him. With a piercing whistle, Thick black smoke came out of the phonograph, and a deep scratch appeared on the originally smooth surface of the record. "Why is this?" William, who had just recovered from his shock, waved his wand and made the two electrical appliances that were obviously no longer worth repairing disappear, but half a second ago, everything was working fine. "It's better not to try this thing for now. But if there's a chance, you can try to find an engineer to ask, maybe they will have some ideas," William thought, and had to temporarily give up the idea of trying to modernize the dormitory, and instead took out the textbook Ancient Magic Simple Introduction for the Ancient Magic course. This subject is more difficult to learn by oneself than he thought. Even with a magic phonetic table and magic dictionary borrowed from the library, it is quite difficult to combine runes interlanguage and define their meanings. Gods. Birch. Real estate? The gods planted a birch tree, cut it down and built a house? What does the rune representing an eel mean? I really believed you. After reading the textbook for a long time, William, who was even more confused than before he started reading the textbook, simply stuffed them all into his shoulder bag and left the room of requirement. It was already late at night. The castle was eerily quiet. The portraits on the wall had changed from the noisy daytime and fell into deep sleep. On William's right, even the half-human, half-eagle, notorious witch Helena Duncan wrapped herself up with her wings and curled up next to her cauldron that was emitting green fluorescent bubbles. Only when the armor on the wall occasionally adjusted its body, the elbows and breastplates collided with each other, making a dull knocking sound. There will be transfiguration and charms classes tomorrow, William thought, reaching out his hand to scratch the wand of the portrait in front of him. The man in the green-pointed wizard hat in the painting stood up with an unhappy face and turned himself. A hidden passage was revealed. As long as he passed through this passage, he could cleverly bypass the location of the principal's office and directly reach the stairs. Ancient runes will have to wait until Thursday. Defense against the dark arts. Forget it, after all, it's defense against the dark arts class. William naturally believed in the magic level of the 1/7th Dark Lord, but he also believed in Professor Quirrell. Although it was a belief in another sense. He quickly walked to the end of the secret passage, and as long as he turned another corner, he would be able to reach the stairs. Speaking of which, should we find a chance to study the Marauder map? Take some small things and exchange a backup with the two brothers. With the help of the spell, William jumped over the steps lightly. He always liked to roam at night because of the feeling of being able to indulge his curiosity and explore the wonders of magic at will. A silver aura that was almost completely transparent and looked very thin suddenly appeared. Although it was blurry, it was extremely fast, sweeping over like a shock wave. The silver aura seemed to be released from the bottom of the stairs, and it bounced back quickly just before it approached William's body. William had experienced this feeling before. On the train, he found Neville's toad, Lefford, in this way. Although his disillusionment spell was not broken at this moment, no matter who was casting the spell, he must have known that there was someone casting the disillusionment spell here. And that person's attainments in spells must be amazingly high, far beyond William, to be able to make the urgent apparition aura cover such a wide range. So late? Who is it? Many questions flashed through William's mind. He noticed that the aura was emitted from the 5th floor of the castle. William stopped and looked for the source of the spell. Going down the corridor, he found an empty classroom. To be honest, this was not difficult. On the entire 5th floor, only this small classroom was lit, not the original orange-yellow light, but colorful light groups that changed from bright to dim, echoing each other, forming a kind of confusion similar to neon. But the identity of the mysterious man was beyond William's expectation, or it was just this way that made it seem reasonable. Through the window next to the classroom, he saw Professor Dumbledore standing in front of a tall bronze mirror, holding the wand in his right hand and muttering to the mirror. From time to time, the top of the wand emitted various colored light groups, making them inlaid in the mirror frame like gems. Dumbledore seemed to be attaching many powerful spells to the mirror. If William was asked to guess, it was probably to arrange the 7 equal parts of the dark magic head. William noticed that the body of the white wizard always stood on one side of the mirror, as if deliberately avoiding himself from seeing the contents on the mirror. If William guessed correctly, it was the mirror of Ares used to store the Philosopher's Stone in the original plot, a magical mirror that could reflect people's inner desires. At this moment, he couldn't help but hesitate. William didn't know whether he should leave quietly and pretend that nothing happened, or just go in and say hello, since Dumbledore already knew of his presence. But Professor Dumbledore suddenly stopped what he was doing and looked towards the door of the classroom. Although William was sure that his disillusionment spell had not been broken, he was more sure that Dumbledore had seen through the spell on him. "Oh? Mr. Buffalo, it seems that I'm not the only one who can't sleep tonight," the White Wizard adjusted his glasses and said. There was a hint of surprise in his tone. It seemed that Dumbledore really didn't expect that he would have a visitor. "Thanks to Aspirin's reward, I actually have a second helmsman. Is this true? It is suggested to set a rule for extra updates, and the down payment plus mortgage after listing. The feasibility is being studied. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 31. Someone has to be responsible for interpreting. "William, why don't you come in and have a cup of tea? An old man like me could use a break," Dumbledore invited William. He tapped the mirror frame with his wand, and the previously shining balls of light suddenly dimmed. The classroom chandelier suddenly lit up, and an exquisite tea table and two colorful high-backed chairs appeared next to Dumbledore. The tea set William had seen was also there. William pushed the door open and walked into the empty little classroom. Although he had tried his best to avoid passing in front of the mirror, he couldn't help but glance at the mirror surface. Fortunately, Dumbledore extinguished all the balls of light. William only saw that the mirror was foggy, as if something was moving, but it seemed to be just some dust. He turned his head and sat opposite Dumbledore. "To be honest, I thought it was some senior student who wanted to sneak into the restricted book area or was curious about the secrets of the corridor on the 4th floor. It's a very good disillusionment spell, I must admit," the White Wizard said, tapping the tea table twice with his knuckles, and the teapot began to heat up. "It's a pity that the professors at Ilvermorny didn't notice your exceptionally keen perception of magic, otherwise Professor Fontana would have considered it more carefully before expelling you from the school, but he would still do it, wouldn't he?" William shook his head. Before he enrolled, the atmosphere in the American wizarding world had actually become very tense. In the first 100 years of Ilvermorny's establishment, most of the graduates came from Indian tribes. In the early days of the American wizarding world, Indians constituted a very important part of the wizarding population. But now, with the changes in ordinary people's society, in the past 200 or 300 years, the proportion of Indian wizards from nomads has been rapidly declining. They witnessed their compatriots being exterminated like animals, being driven to remote protected areas like vagrants, and now almost all of their heritage has been lost. But the American Magical Congress has always implemented a very strict isolation policy, prohibiting all contact between wizards and nomad society, and monitoring their behavior. This makes Indian wizards extremely dissatisfied. Half a century ago, they played a role in the rise of the Second Salem organization, but the movement was stopped by an unexpected guest, so the Magic Congress was able to maintain a fragile balance. Not only that, in recent years, African and Latino wizards have begun to feel that their compatriots are being oppressed, and have always wanted to do something to change this isolation policy. It is said that they even successfully assassinated a nomad commander-in-chief and promoted the deputy commander who was under their imperious curse to the position. It was only when their plan was discovered by the Magic Congress that the imperious curse was lifted in time on the unlucky or lucky guy. This anger has been accumulated for too long. Although the Magic Congress and the professors of Ilvermorny are reluctant to admit it, a secret society mainly composed of Indians and advocating change has quietly emerged. They named themselves the Star Society, and the banner they are holding high now is some of Heisenberg's remarks. "Milk or sugar?" Dumbledore did not answer William directly. "A little milk, thank you," William learned from his last lesson. He took a sip. The rich aroma of milk offset the bitterness of the bad tea leaves. The warm liquid reached his stomach, making him feel warm all over. "To be honest, I thought our second meeting would take place on a nice night. We would sit in my office and talk about something more interesting, not here and today," Dumbledore said, adding a lot of milk and sugar to his tea as he did last time. "But life always needs a little bit of unexpected encounters," William replied. Since the White Wizard did not mention the mirror, William also tacitly did not mention it. He instinctively felt a sense of fear about the mirror. But life needs unexpected encounters, which is not a suitable reason for Hogwarts to cancel the curfew for students, right? Dumbledore smiled and drank the tea in the cup. A feeling told William that the curfew the White Wizard mentioned was not really a curfew. Strictly speaking, I didn't violate the curfew. I just have my own way of interpreting the curfew. Someone has to be responsible for interpreting it. The curfew William was talking about was naturally not a curfew. What about Professor Snape's interpretation of the curfew? Dumbledore sat up a little straighter. His standards don't seem to be very accurate. William sat back a little and leaned on the back of his chair. Dumbledore looked at him quietly, his sky-blue eyes still bright and charming even in the dim light of the small classroom. They didn't speak. It seemed like a long time had passed, and it seemed that it was just because the small classroom was too quiet that it felt like the time was excessively extended. The White Wizard finally spoke and broke the silence here. I think it's getting late, William, you should go back to the common room, he said calmly. To be honest, an old man like me can't stand too many surprises like this. Maintaining a reasonable daily routine is a very serious matter in our opinion. Dumbledore was obviously not talking about daily routine. But William had understood what Dumbledore meant. The confusion charm was obviously not acceptable. It depends on how you translate the surprise. But to be honest, even for young people, staying up late all the time is harmful to the body. So unless it is necessary, we will also be happy to choose to go to bed early and get up early, and study hard. William spread his hands, indicating his helplessness. That would be great, Dumbledore finally nodded. But for the sake of the remaining tea, maybe William, would you like to stay for a while and listen to me tell a little story, perhaps as a relaxing pastime before going to bed? He also leaned back in the chair, his long white beard naturally fell in front of his nightgown, and said with a relaxed look, "Please go ahead." William didn't quite understand the direction of the conversation. This unexpected encounter obviously disrupted Dumbledore's plan. The White Wizard wanted to make sure that he would not do out of line like he did to Marcus and Montague today. William was also sure that he had made his attitude clear. He just wanted to study hard and had no intention of tossing other things here. He believed that a very subtle consensus had just been reached between himself and Professor Dumbledore, or between Heisenberg and Professor Dumbledore. But what about this bedtime story? I once had a student who made a serious mistake during a magic experiment. A very powerful confusion spell hid him, making him believe that the world he lived in was actually just a beautiful dream. In the dream, he could do anything, and even if he failed, he would wake up immediately. To the surprise of all of us, that failure made him successful, making him, who was originally timid, become confident. Not only did he pass the test of 11 newts, but he also joined Gringotts and became a cursebreaker, Dumbledore said calmly. Do you know what he did the day after he woke up from St. Mungo's under the influence of the confusion charm? He did not wait for an answer and continued. He climbed to the roof of the hospital, jumped down from the rooftop, and just before he was about to approach the ground, he used a flying spell that was perhaps the best he had ever done. The plan for additional chapters has not been made yet, but a group has been set up to avoid being worried about running away. Please feel free to vote and reward. The additional chapters after the book is published will be traced back to the time of the book, although there are only 2 people in the group at present. The modern history of the American Magical Society is completely empty. However, it was clearly mentioned when Ilvermorny was founded that the founder absorbed a lot of indigenous students and magic, so the setting is established. Chapter 32, Defeat and Hold a Resentment. Dumbledore did not talk about the student again. William did not ask about the Mirror of Erased. It was as if this unexpected encounter had never happened. After saying goodbye to Dumbledore, he quietly returned to the common room of Ravenclaw and lay down on his bed. The little panda Gabe was sleeping beside his pillow at this moment, with some crystal liquid flowing from the corner of his mouth, as if he had dreamed of something beautiful. Just a dream. Slowly, William fell into a dreamless sleep. The morning came quickly. When William woke up sleepily, his roommate Jimmy Appleby had already changed into wizard robes and was about to push the door to leave the dormitory. Good morning, William. I thought you were going to sleep later. It's just past 7 o'clock. Jimmy Appleby looked at William in surprise, as if he didn't expect him to get up so early. Until he went to bed, William didn't return to the common room. Good morning. William also looked at Jimmy in surprise. Jimmy is a famous gifted Ravenclaw. He has always adhered to the creed of if you can sleep until 10 o'clock, never sleep at 9:59 and 59 seconds. However, with his outstanding talent in spells and transfiguration, his grades have always been ranked quite high in the class. I'm not always good. Jimmy spread his hands and said, seeming to understand William's look of seeing a ghost. But before that, you have to tell me where you found this little guy from for Merlin's sake. Do you know what happened in the common room yesterday? He pointed at Gabe and said excitedly. Did he get into trouble? William looked at Gabe on the pillow, and he snorted lightly in his sleep in response. Let me put it another way. If you go out now and tell a girl that you hope to date her, then even if it's just for the sake of being able to touch this little guy, she will seriously consider it rather than giving you a bad curse in person, Jimmy answered excitedly. I mean, a friend of mine once, he soon realized that he had said too much. To be honest, Jimmy was not ugly, and his grades were good, but his past relationship experience was. It can't be said that he was inconsiderate, but it can only be said that he had a bad record. William heard that he once dated a third-year Hufflepuff girl in Madame Pafty's coffee shop in Hogsmeade. When the other person's face slowly approached him, Jimmy tore a tissue and wiped the corner of her mouth vigorously. After that, he took the girl to the Shrieking Shack, which was said to be haunted, and after telling many ghost stories of ordinary people, he deliberately pretended to be a ghost and screamed to scare her. But he always had a heart for romance. Although in terms of methodology, William really couldn't make up for him. But William understood what Jimmy meant. Gable is not my pet. Professor McGonagall just asked me to take care of him temporarily. If you want Gabe to help your friend, maybe you can bring him some delicious food. He likes sweets very much. William stroked the smooth short hair on Gabe's back. It was a little hard, but it felt very good and warm. But you don't say you are going to become diligent all of a sudden, then Professor Flitwick will be scared by you. He looked at Jimmy, thinking about how he would explain. I just wanted to tell you that the college's Quidditch team will start its first training today. Some people who are interested in joining the college team can take this opportunity to get familiar with it. You know, you can ride on a broom, spin around, play ball, etc. Jimmy made a gesture of throwing a quaffle. He always wanted to join the college's Quidditch team. He hung many moving photos of the team and players on the wall next to his bed, and was even willing to sacrifice some sleep time for this. You are from America. I heard that American wizards also like Quidditch. Maybe you would like to take part in the training? I can take you with me. I dare say Slot will definitely let you try it. He used persuasion on William. Unfortunately, it was useless. Sorry. I have no interest in Quidditch. William shook his head. Although the experience of sitting on a flying broom is not as uncomfortable as it seems, the poles of these brooms are cast with a spell called Cushion Spell, which can comfortably and stably support the back of the wizard. But it is still not a pleasant experience to bear the high speed of the broom with a bare face. Although he has encountered some unpleasant things recently, William has no interest in flying in the fierce wind, wishing to wipe away the endless heartache, not to mention that he is holding a magic wand. Then maybe you are willing to come and cheer me up, Jimmy asked with some regret. William hesitated. He didn't want to make up a reason to reject Jimmy, and after experiencing last night, he couldn't bear to refuse. Well, it's just a tryout. Jimmy obviously understood William's hesitation. At least you're willing to pass by the stadium when the formal selection comes? I mean, if I'm lucky enough and can still hold on until then. He took the initiative to give in again. Let me think about it. William didn't refuse immediately. A smile appeared on Jimmy's face. Then I'll take it as your agreement. The selection is at 3 p.m. on Saturday, the Quidditch Stadium. Slot has already booked the venue in advance, you know. Jimmy said a lot at once like pouring beans. Maybe I can bring Gable with me then. He tentatively pointed at the red panda who had just turned over and was sleeping on his back. Without waiting for William to answer, William, I love you, Jimmy said, waved his hand, and left the dormitory. He's a good window opener. William shook his head, got up and began to tidy himself up and put on his robes. The first class was Professor Flitwick's charms class, and he didn't want to be late anyway. William soon arrived at the Great Hall along the spiral staircase of the Ravenclaw Tower. The Slytherins obviously had not forgotten what happened to Marcus and Montague. When they saw William coming in from the gate, their eyes were like knives, wishing they could cut him into pieces. But when William went to pick cereal and fill milk, facing them, the Slytherins were happy again, as if they were discussing today's lessons. Marcus Flint was the captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team, the heir of the Flint family, and the troll who was known for his aggressiveness in their college. But he was controlled by William's curse without anyone noticing, so it was not wise to provoke him rashly. This was the case for the lower grades, and the same was true for the upper grades. Slytherins, who always knew how to protect themselves, almost engraved the creed of holding a grudge if defeated, and counterattacking if victorious in their blood. At least until they figure out my tricks, no more fools will jump out of the bushes, avoiding the pile of black things that should be accurately defined as high-fat emulsified offal tubes. William picked some fried frankfurters and some very soft stewed ketchup beans for himself. "You are William Buffalo," a female voice that sounded very stiff said. On the 14th day of opening the book, 1,000 collections were reached. "Thank you for your company and support. I'll look forward to walking a longer road with you. Thank you for the reward from Kukulkan 1. Chapter 33, The Slytherin Prefect Who is Unwelcome in Slytherin. "You are William Buffalo," a female voice that sounded very stiff said. William turned around and found that the other person was a Slytherin girl he didn't know at all. She had long light brown hair that was trimmed very neatly, about 6.5 feet tall, and her facial features were as delicate as a sculpture carved out of marble. "I am Gemma Farley, Slytherin's prefect, 5th year." She stretched out her right hand and waited for William. "I thought you were going to take a united stance." William frowned and didn't shake hands with her. "I have heard about the accident that happened to Flint and Montague. I think it must be because the castle has been too hot recently, which has given them some strange ideas." Gemma didn't show any offense, and naturally took her hand back and said. When she said "I," she deliberately emphasized her tone. "It's an interesting statement." William was a little surprised. In fact, the view in our academy now is that the two of them are incompetent, but they are cunning, so they should be punished, but you should not be the one to punish them, so you must be taught a proper lesson. As if she had guessed William's thoughts, Gemma admitted her intention very frankly. "You are from the United States, and your surname is not inherited from those ancient families. This is not pure enough in the eyes of the purebloods." Her words were euphemistic. William understood Gemma's subtext. "So you mean that in order to avoid further trouble, I will be defeated by one of your representatives?" William answered calmly. She seemed to be here to challenge Slytherin, or to hit him. But she seemed to have some little thoughts of her own. "That's what they mean, you know. They want to appear credible, and will spend a lot of effort to select a person who is qualified, popular, and can be sure to defeat you. In my opinion, there are not many people who meet these conditions. Perhaps the one you should be most wary of is the head of the student union, Dwight Yaxley, who is very good at transfiguration and has a deep understanding of curses. Some people say that even if you were to interview for the Auror position now, Rufus Scrimgeour would not hesitate to hire him," Gemma said without reservation. William had reason to believe that she seemed to have revealed a lot more than she should have said. "So what do you mean?" William asked with interest. "The actions of the two of them have begun to attract the attention of others. At the long table of Gryffindor next door, a red-headed person was opening the market, betting on how long it would take for the two of them to cast the first spell, and who had shouted out, 'Silentio, silent!' William shouted the spell in a low voice. He nodded to Gemma, indicating that their conversation would not be disturbed by others at this moment. "I hope to be your partner in Professor Flitwick's club activities. I am also on the invitation list, and I have some information to share with you." Gemma's answer was beyond William's expectations. "I'm listening," William replied calmly. "One of the conventions for new members to join the club is that they must form a team of 2 and persist long enough under the attacks of all the formal members until Professor Flitwick recognizes their performance. It's a very demanding tradition." Hearing Gemma's words, William couldn't help but frown. When being besieged by spells, not only do you need to show very excellent skills and reactions, but you also have to work with a partner who may be a complete stranger, which undoubtedly greatly increases the difficulty of the challenge. No wonder Ravenclaw's prefect Robert Hilliard only participated in the event once and then withdrew in disgrace. "You can trust my level. My grades in spells and defense against the dark arts are both the best in the class, and I don't want to show too much pride, but," her face was slightly raised, obviously very confident in her dual level. "But why did you come to me?" William did not doubt her performance, but he doubted her motives. Gemma was a complete stranger to him, and the timing of her coming was too abrupt. "First of all, you defeated Flint and Montague, and you are qualified to be my partner." Gemma took out the wand with her right hand, swung her left shoulder diagonally, and made a gesture before casting a spell. She blinked slightly, and William understood what she meant, and took out the wand and held it in his hand. "Any qualified student can do it." William shook his head and did not buy this statement. Frankly speaking, even he himself did not expect that a wandless and silent confusion charm could have such a significant effect on them. "I am afraid that in a real duel, both of them will be full of loopholes." "Okay, but you must also want to fill some gaps with that Dorrit Yaxley, don't you?" I just happen to have some grievances with him that need to be settled. He is a pure-blood bastard who has always had some opinions about my becoming a prefect. I have always wanted to give him a bad curse in person." Gemma took a half-step forward, lowered her head slightly, and made a very standard wizard duel preparation posture. She seemed to be trying hard to show an attitude. Or a position. But this is not enough. William still felt that her statement lacked persuasiveness. "Okay. I thought these two reasons were enough to convince you. The real reason is that at present, you are the only student in the entire Hogwarts who cannot see any color with a third eye." Gemma sighed. She took a half step back, put away her wand and put it back on her waist. Third eye, partner, deal. After thinking about it, William still accepted her invitation. The third eye she mentioned seemed very interesting, and he really could use a reliable partner at that time. Reliable, not trustworthy. "I'll find a way to contact you about the place and time of our next meeting." After saying that, Gemma walked towards the Slytherin table, looking very serious. William took his breakfast and sat back at the Ravenclaw table, and rejected all the students who wanted to ask him about what happened just now. "William, you were?" Penelope asked in a low voice. William explained to her the strange attitude Gemma had just shown, but he didn't expect her to show a look of understanding. "She is famous for being unwelcome in Slytherin." "Unwelcome prefect." William felt a little puzzled. "That's right. The Farley family is not only not a member of the 28 clans, but it's not even a pure-blood family in the strict sense. But she is so outstanding in all aspects, even though many people don't like her, Professor Dumbledore still made her a prefect. She is the first in courses such as charms and defense against the dark arts, but I heard that she is best at divination. Professor Trelawney thinks highly of her." When Penelope mentioned Trelawney, she seemed reluctant to call her professor. "She took divination last year, but this year it has been changed to digital divination." There was a clang. The windows of the hall were opened. A large number of owls flew in. Among them, a little owl with a barred belly flew in crookedly and stabbed William's bowl of milk with cereal. Considering Merlin's beard, it was in a terrible state, and it had undoubtedly just experienced a very long journey. Maybe it flew from England. Gemma Farley is the prefect mentioned in the Slytherin introduction. Her Farley family did not mention whether they were pure-blooded, but they all disappeared in 1997, the year Voldemort occupied the Ministry of Magic. The reasonable explanation is that their pure blood cannot stand up to scrutiny. Thanks to Aspirin for the reward. Chapter 34, Triple Great Hermes. Wingardium Leviosa. William snapped his fingers, temporarily letting the poor chick float in the air, then took out his wand, pointed it at it and said, "Enervate." The tip of the wand emitted a gentle light, brushing over the little owl's body, making it close its eyes comfortably. It raised one claw towards William, motioning him to take down the letter tied to it. Hogwarts Castle, Great Hall, Ravenclaw Long Table, Mr. William Buffalo. On the outside of the envelope, the sender wrote in a flourish. "That damn old bee, pretending to me that he didn't know Hermes at all. Did the bird tell him this address?" William complained to Dumbledore in a low voice. This letter was undoubtedly from Hermes. William opened the envelope and found a roll of parchment and a small booklet inside. He unfolded the roll of parchment first. "Dear Mr. H, I am glad that after several months of separation, we can finally communicate in such a more direct and intimate way, although I believe that you must also fully understand the necessity of hiding our identities from each other. According to our last letter, I went to the Muggle world as you explained, and watched a performance called Movie. Although the guard prohibited me from entering just because of my clothes, and a Muggle held a small piece of paper and shouted at me to get out of his place. These are all very rude things, but overall, it can still be called a novel experience. In the last letter they communicated, Hermes mentioned that he had used magic to create a drama and preserved it forever in a magic crystal. Hermes once proudly said that there would be no more than 10 people in the world who mastered and could skillfully use this illusion magic. Mephisto, the wizard who invented this spell, was even regarded as a devil by a Muggle, but apparently even this spell did not teach him to buy tickets to watch movies. I went to the Muggle University and spent a whole week auditing, but I still didn't understand a bit of Muggle medicine. The bacteria, viruses, and a drug or decoction called penicillin that they mentioned confused me. Penicillin? Penicillin, William thought. He could only guess. But Hermes must have attended the wrong class. He should have gone to Modern Medicine 101, not auditing a half-taught professional class. After that, Hermes spent a lot of space to describe his observation records of the world of ordinary people, and the words were full of curiosity and surprise. Although there are disagreements and quarrels in our relationship, I cannot deny that many of your views are fresh and incredible to me. Some time ago, a mutual friend of ours, or at least a mutual acquaintance, visited me, and finally made me decide to embark on an adventure I had never imagined. I have entrusted him with the most proud, but also the most regrettable creation of my life, for temporary safekeeping, but in addition to that, I have also left you some information that may be helpful. He promised to keep them all in the safest place in Hogwarts, but only after passing all the tests can they truly belong to you. At the end, it was Hermes' iconic signature, not his name, but a passage from the Emerald Record, a work in the field of alchemy. I am called the Triple Great Hermes. Because I have the wisdom of 3 parts of the world, the content of the letter ended here. Hermes is Nicholas Flamel. William felt incredible, but inexplicably felt that this was very reasonable. It explained Hermes' amazing attainments in alchemy and potions, and the relationship between him and Dumbledore. It even explains why he is an old bastard. Because Nicholas Flamel is French. All French people are old bastards. And Snape deserved to lose. William also took out the other small book in the envelope. It was a manuscript with a book of hieroglyphics written on the cover. He flipped through it and found that it recorded many authors' explorations of occult ceremonies, alchemical formulas, and words with magical power. Apart from that, he knew nothing. Because the manuscript was written in French and divided into 3 volumes, the names of the 3 volumes were specially translated into English in the catalogue, and only 3 titles were translated. William dared to swear that if this was not intentional, he would eat the milk and the bowl together. Okay. In addition to ancient magic words, we have to learn French. He took out his wand, tapped Nicholas Flamel's letter and the manuscript lightly, added an invisible lock to them, and then put them into the shoulder bag together. What's more troublesome is that in order to get the information left by Nicholas Flamel, and preferably get his address from Dumbledore, William has to go through the corridor on the 4th floor of the castle. Perhaps in Hermes' eyes, he has enough time to challenge, but William, who is familiar with the original plot, naturally knows that he has less than a year left. However, no matter how difficult it is, he must get it. Time is running out. William has foreseen his bald future. After breakfast, he and Penelope came to the classroom of the spell class together. Ravenclaw and Slytherin will take this class together. When they saw William, their expressions suddenly became serious. Obviously they were ready to kill the prestige of this foreigner in class. Hogwarts is the oldest magic school in the world. Their family had already mastered many spells when the wild wizards in the United States were still waving wooden sticks. This is a moment to bet on the divinity of pure blood. Hey, William, Jimmy invited William to sit next to him. Slot has agreed to let me try out for the position of Seeker, 3 training sessions a week. I will definitely be able to pass the official selection on Saturday, so don't forget it then, he pleaded with William in a low voice. Dorothy from Hufflepuff has already promised me. As long as I let her touch Gable, she will agree to go with me to Hogsmeade. Jimmy still did not give up his attempt. Dear Jimmy, believe me, if Professor Flitwick knew that you were thinking about how to please girls in his class, he would be disappointed. Penelope patted her forehead, feeling deeply helpless about Jimmy's performance, even more helpless. Even if Jimmy was so idle, his grades and charms were still only a little worse than Penelope's. I thought he should have gotten used to it. Jimmy spread his hands and replied. Hush, Professor Flitwick is coming. William interrupted their conversation. Professor Flitwick came in from the classroom door, clapped his hands, and let a pile of books pile up behind the podium, creating a step for him, but even if he stepped on it, he was only a head higher than the podium. Welcome back, Professor Flitwick, with a smile on his face, took out a thick booklet and began to call out everyone's name. After calling everyone's name, he clapped his hands happily, no less. There is a new student joining our class. You don't know how happy I am now. Professor Flitwick's voice was shrill. Before class, we still have a little time. Maybe you will be interested in thinking about a question with me? If you answer well, I will give you some house points as a reward. His words cheered up everyone. Whether it was Ravenclaw or Slytherin. What do you think is the basis of spells, thanks to King Kwang Yen's monthly ticket? Finally Hermes. Legend has it that alchemy originated in Egypt 1900 BC. The Egyptian pharaoh Hermes, his legendary father Thoth, and Hermes' eldest son, the high priest Tat, merged into one, becoming the legendary Hermes. This trinity of gods condensed the knowledge of alchemy into 13 sentences, engraved them on an emerald plate, and passed them down to the world. People call this text Emerald Tablet, or Smaragdine Table. The Emerald Tablet is interpreted as being able to refine gold or the elixir of life, and its significance in mysticism makes it very suitable to be the pen name of Nicholas Flamel. Chapter 35. If you don't speak, you might look smarter. What do you think is the basis of spells? Professor Flitwick asked a question that seemed simple, but was undoubtedly very complicated. Mr. Stewart, he pointed at the name of a Slytherin who raised his hand. Of course it's the spell. Everyone knows that only when we recite the spell accurately can the spell take effect. It's just that some people don't have enough talent, so they can't use it, the Slytherin student answered proudly. What he wanted to say must not be talent. A very standard answer. Are there any other opinions, Miss Clearwater? Professor Flitwick did not answer right or wrong, but pointed at Penelope's name. She seemed a little surprised, but still stood up and said, maybe it's the language? I have learned some Latin, and many spells are written in Latin, or modified on the basis of Latin. After she finished speaking, she smiled. Stupid, can you cast a spell inexplicably by just shouting a few words in Latin? Then wouldn't all the muggles be wizards? No wonder they would learn such a useless language, the boy named Stuart said in a low voice but just loud enough for everyone to hear. Very interesting point of view. I think we can give Ravenclaw 2 points. Professor Flitwick liked Penelope's answer very much. He clapped his hands, but still did not announce the answer. Instead, he called another Ravenclaw student, Mr. Bennett. Professor, is it the wand? Professor Binns said before that the Goblin Rebellion was not because wizards not only refused to share the knowledge of spells with them, but also prohibited them from having the right to use wands. So today, after several rebellions failed, they can only use a few innate magic talents. The boy had thick bags under his eyes and looked like he had not slept well, a very sharp contrast to Jimmy who was sitting next to William. Excellent answer. I think if it's Professor Binns, he would definitely be willing to give you extra points. Professor Flitwick clapped his hands again. If he still remembers the existence of extra points, beside William, Jimmy muttered quietly, the last time there was a record of Professor Binns giving extra points, his grandfather was probably not even born yet. Are there any other answers? Professor Flitwick asked a few more students and got many answers, including magic, bloodline, rituals, will, courage, and spell-casting movements. Perhaps Mr. Buffalo would like to share his views? I want to know how you view the source of spells in Ilvermorny, he suddenly called William. To be honest, William has been thinking about this question since he came to this world and the first magic riot occurred, but in Ilvermorny, professors never mentioned this issue. To be honest, I don't know, Professor, he stood up and answered frankly. Tisk, I thought you had some brilliant ideas. Even if you don't, you can at least answer the question about the weather, Stuart said in a low voice. His words caused the Slytherins to laugh, but the Ravenclaws didn't find it funny. Even Professor Flitwick frowned. William always hated those who liked to climb up by stepping on others' heads, but couldn't contribute any valuable ideas. But we can rule out the spell first, William said, and then shouted the spell. Cetacuses, Philosophus Manuses, he snapped his right fingers. Gray-black smoke suddenly appeared in the air, and quickly changed its position. And finally gathered into a sentence that was exactly the same as the spell. Excellent wandless casting skills. I think I have to add 5 points to Ravenclaw, Professor Flitwick nodded. This spell means, if you don't speak, you might appear smarter, William introduced. Although the literal meaning of the spell is indeed like this, what he actually used was the smoke writing spell recorded in a book he found in the Ravenclaw alcove. Smoke writing spell, a practical invention. The author of this book is Lorcan MacLeod, the former Minister of Magic, who is also a Ravenclaw and invented this spell when he was in school. The text floated in the air for a while, and then suddenly fell on Stuart's face and exploded into a ball of black ash. You! Damn it! Stuart stood up suddenly. He was very angry and wanted to curse William, but he was interrupted before he started talking. Sorry, Mr. Stewart, I was careless for a moment. Perhaps it is too difficult for me to cast such a long spell without a wand. William apologized very sincerely. Turgia, he took out the wand with his right hand, drew a circle casually, and shouted the spell. The air in front of him suddenly began to surge, turning into wind and blowing towards Stuart's face, twisting his face into a very funny expression like a rag. Finite, Professor Flitwick exhaled a spell, and the wind turned into magic suddenly dissipated in the air. William, I don't think Mr. Stewart meant it. We are in class. Ravenclaw will be deducted 5 points. He stopped William's revenge and said in a serious tone. Professor Flitwick's words made Stuart stunned. Ravenclaw added 5 points and deducted 5 points. William was not criticized, but he himself did not get any compensation. But he was not brave enough to provoke the professor. Of course, Professor, please let me continue answering. William also understood what Professor Flitwick meant. I partially agree that language is the basis of spells. Just like Penelope said, both Latin and runes are magical languages, but you know, before Aesop's Earl came to the New World on the Mayflower, there were already spells there. The Indian shamans believe that the spirits in nature have wills and can bless them, allowing them to release all kinds of supernatural powers. Magical creatures also have many innate talents, such as thunderbirds that can communicate with thunderclouds, and longhorned water snakes that can temporarily give people the ability to be invisible and fly. William paused for a moment, and after sorting out his thoughts, he continued, as for the wand. The fact that wizards can master the skills of casting without a wand after training proves that the wand is more of a tool for wizards to cast spells. It is indeed very important, but not necessary. I also used to think that it should be the wizard's own cognition, but later I found that any wizard, as long as they remember the spell and perform the action in the standard way, can cast most spells, even if they don't understand the meaning of the spell itself, just like when Ilvermorny was first established. This is also what really puzzled William. Then I think you must have a guess, right? Maybe you are willing to say it and share it with us, Professor Flitwick encouraged William. Everyone was looking at William. His words undoubtedly caused waves in their hearts. Most of them had been exposed to this knowledge. But they always regarded it as a natural talent of wizards, without any in-depth thinking. After reading some books written by ordinary people, I gradually came up with an idea that may not be very reliable. Could it be that the subconscious of all of us wizards is actually connected to each other in some form? Like a group trend of thought? Or a shared magical space? When one of the members masters a certain spell, other members naturally have the possibility of mastering this spell. William hesitated for a moment. This idea is undoubtedly very radical, and there is no theory or experiment to support it, but he still said his conjecture. Thanks to Batman Joker for the reward. I changed a new book cover. I will recommend it on Sunday. I hope readers will try not to keep the book. The data determines whether you can advance to the next round. Spell comes from Happy's words in Prime Minister. Half a step to YPM to rule the world. How to explain the weird magic system in HP, it makes my head go astray, and then I came up with this idea. Chapter 36 100 Monkeys. Excellent thinking. For this alone, I think I have to give Ravenclaw 20 points. I must admit, William, your answer may be the most interesting answer I have heard from a fourth-year student since I started teaching, Professor Flitwick said happily, perhaps because of excitement, his voice sounded shrill. Although he had never really understood the concept of the subconscious, he obviously understood what William wanted to express. In fact, William was inspired by Jung's 100-eyed ape effect, or the 100-monkey effect. A few decades ago, some scientists in Kyoto were studying a group of monkeys on Kashima Island and gave them a kind of muddy potato that they had never seen before. At first, the monkeys were hesitant about whether to eat the muddy potato, until a smart monkey took it to the beach, washed it and ate it, and then the other monkeys began to follow suit and wash the potato before eating it. It is amazing that when the 100th monkey also learned to wash the potato, the other monkeys who had never learned this skill seemed to have mastered this technique overnight. Not only that, before long, this potato washing technique even crossed the ocean and was mastered by a group of monkeys on Mt. Takasaki in Oita Prefecture on the other side of the ocean, who had never had any contact with it before. William has been thinking, could it be that all wizards' magic actually has a common source, or is wrapped up in some kind of mysterious connection, allowing them to change the world to a certain extent according to their own will, just like transfiguration, while also abiding by some common rules, because only in this way can it explain why standardized spells and actions appear. Each wizard is born with a different ability to control a magic, just like the difference in the strength of an antenna signal, which also determines the distance between their individual performances. Perhaps I can add some background knowledge to your thinking. Professor Flitwick nodded, indicating that William could sit down. We all know that a successful spell has 3 elements, the spell, the action, and the wizard's determination. Professor Flitwick tapped his wand and wrote the 3 elements on the blackboard. William was not unfamiliar with this concept. He had always suspected that his poor performance in spells that required emotions was due to the lack of determination. But do you know how spells are born? Everyone shook their heads. To be honest, these contents are usually only mentioned in Newt's courses. Professor Flitwick nodded and said, because only then will wizards usually start to consider breaking the spell, or want to go a little further, explore the possibility of creating a spell. But since Mr. Buffalo has mentioned so much, I think I can also briefly share some of my own experiences. The classroom was silent, no one spoke, and everyone was looking at Professor Flitwick nervously, expecting to get an answer from him. First of all, when you have the idea of creating a new spell, you'd better have a very thorough consideration of what the effect of the spell is, how it should happen, how to adjust its effect, and perhaps satisfy some mysterious rules that we still don't know. But once these conditions are met with luck, you will suddenly find that the originally envisioned spell is given a special meaning one day. No matter who releases it in the way you thought, it will have the same effect. At that time, this spell can be recorded or even written in a book. Professor Flitwick paused and waved his wand. The spell and action on the blackboard were connected by a line. You may have heard that emotions are very powerful. Sometimes when a spell is created, the wizard himself will pour too much emotion or will enter it, and the spell will have its own ownership. It is difficult to say whether it is emotion that creates the spell, or the spell is tainted with emotion. This becomes black magic and white magic. Expecto Patronum. Professor Flitwick waved his wand and summoned a silver-white weasel, introducing, the Patronus charm is a very typical example. To summon your own Patronus, you must recall those positive memories or have an unwavering desire to protect others. Many people in the classroom saw the appearance of a Patronus for the first time. They stared at the silver weasel jumping and dancing in the air, and finally turned into a ball of silver-white shimmering mysterious mist. It completely disappeared in the classroom. William raised his hand. Yes, Mr. Buffalo. Professor Flitwick looked at William. Professor, what about alchemy? William asked another question. Alchemy seems to be on the same path as magic, but also seems to be going in opposite directions. Many secret rituals, formulas, and symbols seem to follow their own logic. Alchemy is a very complex, mysterious theory, and I haven't read much about it. I think the person you should consult is Professor Dumbledore. He is one of the very few alchemy masters in the world. Professor Flitwick shook his head and did not give a definite answer. He clapped his hands to bring the young wizards who were lost in thought back to their senses, and said, maybe it's like what Mr. Buffalo said, or maybe not. I hope that someone among you will eventually be able to find the truth, but you must also remember to always ask yourself a question. Is it the wizards who are chasing the spells? Or is it the spells that are chasing the wizards? As for now, I think we should start the class. In this class, we will start with a relatively simple but very practical spell, the vanishing spell. Professor Flitwick tapped the blackboard, and the content previously written on it disappeared, replaced by neat and uniform handwriting, carefully describing the spell. Deleterious, disappear without a trace. William found that unlike when he was in Ilvermorny, the spell's professor would strictly require them to shout out the spell according to the unified standard movements. Professor Flitwick would not only explain the effect of the spell, but also tell the students how to adjust the spell so that they can play the greatest role in different situations. After the explanation, everyone began to practice waving their wands, while Professor Flitwick wandered around the classroom, guiding every student he passed by. Mr. Terry, the correct movement should be to raise your wand slightly, then swing it diagonally downward. Very good, you are very close to success, Miss Clearwater. When you shout out the spell, remember to pause briefly between L and T. 3 points to Ravenclaw for Mr. Buffalo's excellent performance in the vanishing spell. Although the vanishing spell is a relatively simple spell, until the end of the get out of class, no more than 5 people in the entire class successfully used it. To William's slight regret, the annoying Stuart was one of them. After class, Jimmy stared at William with a look as if he were looking at a monster, and sighed, Merlin's beard. William, are you Merlin's illegitimate child? Thanks to book friend Louis Chen for the reward. Thanks to the exiled immortal Lee Tebe for the reward. Thanks to the monthly ticket from Obsessed Chemistry. Thanks to the monthly ticket from Chen. Chapter 37. I am actually Merlin's illegitimate son. After class, Jimmy stared at William with a look like he was looking at a monster, and sighed, Merlin's beard. William, are you Merlin's illegitimate child? Well, since you have discovered this secret, I will not hide it. I am actually Merlin's illegitimate child left in Avalon. Because of a failed magic experiment, I was unfortunately sent to the outside world through an unstable portal. Now I need to raise a sum of gold galleons to buy materials and draw magic circles. If you can sponsor me 5 gold galleons, I promise that once I successfully return to Avalon, I will share Merlin's most precious magic book with you," William said nonsense seriously. "Damn, where did you make up this story?" Jimmy gently hit William's arm and said. Thinking of William's performance in the spell class, he suddenly showed a very hesitant expression. "Or are you really serious?" "You are not, right?" "Of course not, you." His reaction made Penelope laugh out loud. "I knew it. How could such a good thing only cost 5 galleons?" Jimmy muttered quietly. "In your opinion, is it suspicious that the number of gold galleons is too small?" "I'm just more diligent," William shook his head and said. He really wasn't exaggerating at all. In terms of talent and magic, he might not even be as good as Jimmy. It was just that as a time traveler, his damned curiosity and a natural sense of crisis kept driving him forward. "Okay, we have to go to the Transfiguration classroom," Penelope urged the two of them to leave quickly. They walked skillfully through the magic staircase and headed towards the second floor. When passing the west corridor on the second floor of the castle, a familiar figure came into William's sight. "Professor Kettleburn," William shouted to the professor of carve magical creatures, who walked on wooden prostheses but was extremely agile, because his movements were too strange. Professor Kettleburn was holding a not very big wooden box in both hands, bending over, and walking carefully downstairs. Rather than being cautious, it would be better to say sneaky, William thought. "Minerva." Professor Kettleburn shuddered suddenly when he heard William's words, and blurted out subconsciously. He turned his head quickly, and saw that it was William and the others, and then he took a deep breath. "Buffalo, I thought it was McGonagall just now. Are you going to class? Then go quickly, and don't let the professor wait too long. Remember to say hello to him for me." Professor Kettleburn waved his hand and said to William with a smile, but his words sounded guilty. "You are." William pointed to the box in Professor Kettleburn's hand, and noticed where William's eyes were, so he covered the box more tightly. "Nothing. A little gift from a friend. It's not dangerous at all. It doesn't violate school rules," Professor Kettleburn said loudly, but it sounded empty. From his words, William had guessed at least 2 properties of the things in the box. It might be dangerous, and it definitely violated the school rules. "He's really not good at lying," Jimmy complained in her low voice. "Okay, Professor, we'll go to the Transfiguration classroom and tell Professor McGonagall that you said hello to her." William pretended to leave. Wait. Just as he guessed, Professor Kettleburn was really anxious. He called William in a low voice and said, "Don't, just say you didn't see me, that I didn't show up. In short, don't mention me to Professor McGonagall." "Okay." This made William even more curious. Of course, William pointed to the small box that was tightly covered by Professor Kettleburn. "Okay, but you have to promise not to tell anyone about this." Professor Kettleburn sighed, waved them closer, and whispered, "A friend of mine got me some ash snake eggs. I'm going to take them to Hagrid and ask him to see if he can find a way to keep some alive." Ash snake eggs. Merlin's beard. "No wonder Professor Dumbledore has permanently banned you from the owl shed." Penelope covered her mouth and whispered. Ash snake eggs emit extremely strong heat and must be kept with a freezing spell at all times to prevent them from hatching. If they are not kept properly and the ash snakes accidentally hatch, it will only take a while to burn the entire room to ashes. I heard that decades ago, the entire hall of Hogwarts was burned down because a reckless wizard cast an amplification spell on an ash snake during a pantomime. She then realized that William might not know about this magical creature and explained to him. "It also has medicinal value." Professor Kettleburn smiled awkwardly. "Can we use it as a love potion? For Merlin's sake, we already have Madame Pomfrey's medicine for malaria, although it tastes a bit bitter." Jimmy suddenly became excited. "Of course. No." Penelope looked at Jimmy warily until he stepped back awkwardly and spread his hands to indicate that he would give up the idea. "Professor, I have heard of the saying split it in half when we meet." William made a suggestion in a low voice. "Impossible. Furious Gorgon, do you know how expensive the eggs of the fire ash snake are on the black market?" Professor Kettleburn refused without hesitation. "But you can't store them in the castle, right? If Professor McGonagall finds out." William's calm voice sounded like the devil's whisper in Professor Kettleburn's ears. "You mean you didn't say you wanted to? Put me." He pointed at himself and then pointed to the east side of the corridor. That was the direction of Professor McGonagall's office. "How is that possible?" "But you can't keep using freezing spells on it." If they catch fire in Hagrid's hut, there's the forbidden forest next to it. But what if I have a way to solve all these problems? William's words were like a knife, cutting through Professor Kettleburn's defenses bit by bit. He didn't need to lie, because the most powerful weapon at this moment was the truth. Professor Kettleburn looked at him expectantly. Just like those who gave their souls to the devil. I have a way to keep them under the protection of the freezing spell, but not to freeze the young in the snake eggs to death. If we look at it from another angle, you are not actually giving me half of the snake eggs, but recovering 50% of the costs that were originally destined to be wasted. For economics, William has always had his own unique way of interpreting it. We'll meet you at Hagrid's hut after dinner, Professor Kettleburn whispered. Thanks to Hogwarts. For the sake of Merlin's beard, when he was in Ilvermorny, he couldn't play with such serious dangerous goods. Thanks to Pi Just Napio for the tip. Thanks to Union for the tip. I'll try to promote it on Sunday. Please read it and support it with all kinds of votes. Thank you. I'm promoting a book that has kept me stuck for 2 hours. It's really good. Just read it, really. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 38 Rapid Transformation. After saying goodbye to William and the others, Professor Kettleburn quickly left the second floor, as if he was afraid that Professor McGonagall would suddenly come out from somewhere and catch him. William, are you really going to help Professor Kettleburn and Hagrid raise the fire ash snake? I don't hate him, but I always feel that he is a little, how should I put it, crazy, Penelope said with some concern. I heard that some time ago, Professor Kettleburn received his 60-second probation, for Merlin's pants. So he is either a troublemaker that no one can afford to mess with, or he must be very good at what he is doing now, or both. This way, he will not be kicked out of Hogwarts, right? Compared to her, Jimmy seemed more optimistic. His words were also to the point. I think another professor fits these two situations better. But let's go to the Transfiguration classroom quickly. Professor McGonagall never likes people who are late. Penelope urged them to speed up. Her words were absolutely true. When William and his friends arrived at the classroom, a grey and black British short-haired cat was already sitting on the podium. Noticing William and his friends coming in, it tilted its head slightly and looked at them with interest. Professor McGonagall, they came to the podium and greeted the professor. The cat that Professor McGonagall transformed into also nodded in response. Professor McGonagall's reputation was obviously known to everyone from the farthest entrance hall of Hogwarts to the tallest Ravenclaw tower. When there were still 10 minutes before the class, all the students had arrived in the classroom. Even Gryffindor. The short-haired cat yawned, jumped down from the podium, and turned into Professor McGonagall in the next moment. Unfortunately, she was still wearing the green wizard robe that William had worn when he first met her. No wonder Madame Malkin complained about it. Very good, she looked around the classroom and nodded. I'm glad that we can continue the Transfiguration course this year. As I have always emphasized to you, Transfiguration is undoubtedly the most complex and dangerous spell in your Hogwarts course. Professor McGonagall's expression was extremely serious. No one would doubt the truth of her words. Mr. Dusev, if you're done with the toys in your hands, please help me recall what we learned in class last year. Professor McGonagall suddenly called the name of a student from her own college and asked him to answer the question. Oh, Professor, the boy put something down in a panic, stood up, and recalled, we learned to turn dead objects into living things and make them move. And how to identify whether living things are the products of transformation and restore them. That's right, Mr. Dusev, that's right. If you can be more serious and spend the time you should spend on studying Transfiguration on Transfiguration instead of studying Gobstone, I think the turtle you transformed in the final exam will not have the pattern of a teapot. Professor McGonagall nodded and asked the boy to sit down. Starting from this semester, the Transfiguration we are going to learn will be more complex and more profound, because this year you are not only preparing for the final exams, but also for the crucial ALS test next year. Many students once thought that this seemed to be too early, but I can guarantee that when they reach the 5th year, most of them will regret their negligence and laziness in the past year. ALS is the abbreviation of the Ordinary Wizarding Level Examination. All young wizards must take it in the 5th year. The results of this exam are very important. The results of the exam determine whether they can participate in the advanced classes of these courses in the 6th and 7th years, and finally obtain NUTs, the highest level of diplomas, certificates for advanced wizarding level exams. Mr. Buffalo, she suddenly called William, mind showing me the content of the Transfiguration class in the 3rd year when you were in Ilvermorny? Maybe it will help me understand your learning progress and your mastery. Of course, Professor. William stood up and drew his wand. He could feel the eyes of the classroom focused on him, but this feeling was nothing new since he crossed over. In the 3rd year, we learned fast transfiguration, William recalled, raising his wand. Verto, he quickly stabbed downwards and shouted a spell. The table in front of him suddenly began to twist strangely, and then turned into a marble human sculpture. It, or she, had a crown on its head, holding a wand in hand, and looking straight ahead. Ravenclaw statue, a smart Gryffindor guessed. Such a large transfiguration object. How is it possible? He is also a 4th year, a girl from Ravenclaw whispered. William forgot her name, but only remembered that she seemed to be from somewhere in the east of England. No, the most amazing thing is that William's transformation speed is too fast, too fast. I swear, he only recited one spell. The knowledgeable Jimmy interrupted her. In their opinion, this was simply unbelievable. As we all know, the size of the object determines the difficulty of transfiguration. Matches can be easily turned into needles, but if you want to transform a table, it takes a lot of magic power. Such a short transformation time is incredible, because William not only has to use this time to achieve the transformation, but also has to simultaneously show the details of the creature to be transformed in his mind. For Merlin's sake, this is a human brain, not a heart, and it cannot be divided into 4 petals. It's a great idea to use the existing impressions in the mind as a template for transformation. This can greatly shorten the thinking time during transformation and reduce the requirements for magic power. Professor Dumbledore told me that your transfiguration ranked 1st in Ilvermorny, and it seems that you really deserve it. Professor McGonagall smiled and applauded William, saying, Ravenclaw plus 10 points for Mr. Buffalo's wonderful transfiguration. Thank you, Professor. William wanted to wave his wand to change the statue back to its original appearance, but Professor McGonagall shook his head, signaling him not to do so first. Quick transfiguration is an advanced transfiguration technique. At Hogwarts, we usually start to learn it after the 5th grade. Some of you will have the opportunity to learn this dangerous but practical technique in mine its advanced class. But William, you also need to spend more energy on conventional transfiguration and think deeply about the details. This will help you form a more specific appearance when using quick transfiguration. Professor McGonagall took out her wand and pointed it at the sculpture that William had transformed. The tip of the wand emitted a bright silver light. The marble of the sculpture illuminated by this light suddenly turned into liquid, twisting and changing rapidly. But after a moment, she stopped and motioned the little wizards to come closer and take a closer look at the sculpture. It has become more beautiful. The flaws on the surface caused by William's lack of impression have all been repaired. The facial features look more lively, and the eyes are as real as if they were alive. Even the words engraved on the crown are shining with a faint gilded luster. Thanks to Single's Eye for the reward. I will try to push it tomorrow. Please help me. There is no mention of rapid transformation in the original novel, but in the Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore and Fu Tao were fighting, the speed of their transfiguration was obviously ridiculously fast, and it is impossible for him to think of the details slowly, so the setting is established. Chapter 39 A Miserable Failure. As expected of Professor McGonagall, William praised in a low voice and put away his wand. At Ilvermorny, they learned simple transfiguration from the very beginning, which is to transform things based on the subconscious impression in their minds. Simple transfiguration is a practical transfiguration. Compared with regular transfiguration, simple transfiguration is faster and requires less magic power, but because it mainly relies on pounding miracles, it requires the wizard's mind to be very focused, and it is inevitable that there are flaws. At this moment, the connection between him and the statue formed by transfiguration has disappeared. This means that Professor McGonagall not only easily took over his transformation, but also did better on the original basis. This is the real monster. Okay, let's start the class. After everyone looked at the statue for a while, Professor McGonagall waved her wand and turned it back to the gray desk before. Starting this semester, we will learn the more complex transformation of living things in transfiguration. Compared with a previous transformation of objects into living things, the transformation of living things is much more dangerous, She took out a cage of mice from under the podium and asked everyone to take turns to come up and get it. Although in the original book and after meeting Professor McGonagall for the first time, William was sure that she was a very strict teacher, but he still underestimated her strictness. Mr. Buffalo, I don't think your teacup should have decorations like eyes, and its surface should be smoother. It should be a delicate and elegant porcelain, not a tooth cup for toothbrushes. After turning William's transformed teacup back into a mouse for the third time, Professor McGonagall even asked him to use the drawing spell to draw the imaginary teacup before transforming it. It was not until the bell rang that William conjured a teacup that satisfied her, allowing her to add 3 points to Ravenclaw. Finally, for Merlin's sake, William sighed. He felt a sense of relief for the first time in a long time. Professor McGonagall just has higher expectations of you. Look at that guy named Dras, his teacup can even bite people, Jimmy complained, shaking his hands. Obviously he is the protagonist of the story. After a very busy morning, the only thing left in the afternoon was Professor Binns' History of Magic, perhaps the most boring course at Hogwarts. It is said that Professor Binns has been teaching the history of magic since the founding of Hogwarts, but I don't know if he forgot to bring his sense of humor when he turned into a ghost, or if he only remembered the knowledge of the history of magic, so that listening to his class has a strong sleep-inducing effect. After lunch, Penelope dragged William to the library to check some records about the founding of Hogwarts. William saw Hermione here without surprise. To be more precise, it was her messy brown hair, and she was buried behind the tall books on the table. I saw her here last night too. It's a pity that she didn't get into Ravenclaw because she loves studying so much. Penelope, who had taken back a stack of books, walked to William, noticed the direction of his gaze, and said in a low voice, "I think she's fine, it's nothing," shaking his head. William helped her throw the pile of books she was holding into her shoulder bag. He just remembered that he spent his first year in Ilvermorny in the same way. The Travels of the Strange Wizard Pollock Williams saw the top book on the pile, with the title written in Old English on the leather cover. He once walked all the way from England to the north of Scotland, and it is said that he once participated in the famous Great Pagan Army. I guess you must have encountered some wizard settlements or retreats, right? Penelope explained. Are you still studying the joke you said at that time? William asked in surprise. But ordinary people are not bored, so they would not have the time to study the wizard ecology of Britain in the Middle Ages. That's not a joke, but a serious and valuable project. Penelope's eyes when she was serious were very similar to Professor McGonagall. Zhangqiu and Margarita are also helping. I wanted to ask that girl. She pointed slightly with a corner of her eyes to refer to Hermione. But she seemed to be under a lot of pressure, so I didn't bother her. Professor Flitwick also thought our topic was interesting, and he promised to help us contact an old friend who could help us a lot. They talked quietly, walked out of the library, and headed for the History of Magic classroom. At the moment the bell rang, Professor Binns came out from behind the blackboard. Now, let's start the class, he said in a calm voice. 5 minutes later. Okay, get out of class is over, Professor Binns said in a calm voice. To be honest, William had never slept so well, especially when he was in Ilvermorny. The professor who taught them the history of magic was a very grumpy old man in his 40s. Whenever someone in class couldn't answer the question he had just talked about, he would punish the unlucky student by making him stand on the podium and write "I am a wizard, not a brainless baboon" 10 times on the blackboard with chalk. William would rather duel with 10 Marcus at once than encounter such a social death tragedy. What a long class. Behind William, Jimmy also woke up lazily. The table was a bit high for him, which made his neck hard when he slept. For Merlin's pigtails, you only lasted 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Even William lasted 5 minutes. Penelope strongly condemned Jimmy's behavior. William smiled proudly. It's not that our army didn't work hard, it's really that the other side dragged out the causal weapon. He found that the more he wanted to listen carefully to Professor Binns' words, the easier it was for him to fall asleep. So later William decided to fight him to the end, took the initiative to put down the textbook, and began to listen to Professor Binns' speech with full concentration. This effect is really great, William thought comfortably. Pa. This is really a miserable failure, he corrected his thoughts with satisfaction. Honestly, why didn't Professor Dumbledore and the others consider letting Professor Binns go? You know, he must have forgotten that he has become a ghost, Jimmy sighed and asked in a low voice. He has been working diligently for Hogwarts for nearly 1,000 years. If he wakes up, he should be willing to go on, right? Instead of being like those ghosts, who have lost their meaning here, but don't have enough courage to take that step. Professor Binns is one of the most special ghosts entrenched in Hogwarts. He doesn't even know that he is dead. Instead, he gets up in the morning, changes into wizard robes, goes to the classroom of history of magic, and imparts valuable knowledge to the young wizards like every day in the past. I don't know. I heard that the headmaster had considered this idea before, to wake up Professor Binns through a spell. But they didn't do it later, and the matter was shelved from then on and became a historical legacy. Penelope shrugged and replied, I only know that the headmaster at that time was a black. Daily requests. Happy Chinese Valentine's Day. The Great Heathen Army refers to the Great Heathen Army, the largest invasion of Britain in the history of the Vikings, a war launched by the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok to avenge his father. Chapter 40 Blame it on Blake. Ah, Black, that explains a lot. Jimmy clapped his hands in sudden realization. It's all Black's fault. Although Black's name is a very prominent existence in the Sacred 28 clans, it is regrettable that almost nothing good happens when this name is attached. Well, if you don't mind, I have a Quidditch practice to go to. Jimmy stuffed the thick history of magic into his bag and said goodbye to William and Penelope. I also have to go to the digital divination class. If you don't have anything to do, maybe you can come and audit it? I think Professor Victor will not mind. I heard that he actually always wants to make the classroom look less empty. Penelope invited William. Forget it. To be honest, I thought you were more of a pragmatist. William shook his head. He had little interest in this kind of prediction course, whether it was based on egg white and yolk, smoke, vanilla, crystal ball, tarot cards or star map. Even mathematics is the same. But William could never understand why these Ravenclaws always had an inexplicable yearning for prophecy and divination. Oh. Of course, I don't like to know the future in advance because it will ruin all the surprises. If I have to say, I just simply like the feeling of guessing it. Penelope chuckled and shook her head. She quickly disappeared at the door of the classroom. Okay. Since there's nothing to do, let's go to Hagrid in advance. I hope they haven't had their beards burned by the fire ash snake or something. William picked up his shoulder bag and walked towards the entrance hall. When he walked down the magic staircase, he happened to meet Filch leading 7 or 8 serious-looking male and female wizards in. The leader William felt a little familiar. He had a short gray hair that was neatly combed, and he looked serious. Strange, it's just the beginning of school, what are they doing here? William stood on the steps, quietly waiting for Filch, the castle manager, to take them upstairs. Do you want to know about them? A voice suddenly sounded in his ears. For the sake of Merlin's goatee. Protego, William shouted the spell fiercely, and at the same time, his body subconsciously jumped back. He hit the wall hard, and he gasped in pain. I'm sorry to scare you. I didn't know you would react so strongly, the voice apologized embarrassedly. William calmed down and followed the voice. It turned out to be a ghost he had seen at the beginning of the school year. It was him who just passed through the wall and appeared on William's left. I am Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington. Of course, you can call me Nick like other little wizards. You are William, right? Professor Dumbledore introduced you. The ghost introduced himself. When he was alive, he was knighted in the Mimsy Porpington area, but after his death, he turned into a ghost and was often called Nick the Nearly Headless. William Buffalo. William hesitated for a moment, but decided not to shake hands. He still remembered the feeling of being passed through by a ghost last time, and he definitely didn't want to try it again. When I passed by just now, I heard them call the leading wizard Crouch. They came here to ask Professor Dumbledore for help to deal with the dark wizard group that is roaming around in the UK. Nick said easily. You seem very curious. I just have some impression of the leader, William replied. He had remembered the news he saw last night. But he didn't expect the people in the Ministry of Magic to act so quickly and use the strongest white magic today. Accio Albus Dumbledore flew over. I heard that they have another big thing besides this, but the leader doesn't allow them to discuss it because this matter is still in preparation and involves international affairs. Nick, who is almost headless, said casually. William saw his transparent expression and hesitated. Nick, he asked. No, forget it, it's nothing, I have no hope. For hundreds of years, I knew I should be more open-minded. Maybe one day I will dare. Nick seemed to want to ask something. He stopped again and shook his head. Nick, William emphasized a little. Well, if you really want to know, I think, did you have a twin brother or sister who met with misfortune when you were very young? Nick asked slowly. No, William shook his head. He was an only child, and his parents were just ordinary residents living in the small town of Revere. Then how could this happen? Nick showed a very surprised expression. When I passed through your body, I felt a kind of separation. It was like there was a layer wrapped around the outside. You know, it has been dead for a long time, but it still exists in some form, the ghost tried to explain to William. A layer of shell, William gave an example. Yes, that's right. I thought it might be the obsession left by your blood relatives, or a remnant soul, unconsciously guarding you. But if not, it wouldn't be that your soul was split into two parts, but installed in the same body, right? Nick answered in confusion. Although Nick was still confused, William had a guess. When he was a child, he heard from his parents that he had severe suffocation when he was born, and his heart stopped for a while, and he was rescued very thrillingly later. It was hard to say whether he was rescued or someone else was assigned to the mission. Thank you, Nick. Will this situation have any impact on me? William suppressed all the thoughts in his mind and asked the ghost calmly. To be honest, I don't know. But this layer of your shell has obviously been dead for too long, and has long lost any consciousness or memory. Maybe one day when you wake up, it will naturally dissipate. Nick spread his hands, indicating that he didn't understand. I just think that if I can leave like this, it would be a good choice. I can't retreat, and I dare not step forward, because there is only thick fog in front of me. Being able to dissipate like this and return to nothingness, maybe, it can be regarded as a kind of relief, he sighed, or at least made a sign gesture. The words sounded full of regret. Goodbye, William, goodbye, Nick. Nick, who was almost headless, turned around and got into the wall. Interesting, William sorted out his thoughts and walked out of the hallway. The evening sunlight at Hogwarts was not dim, but a bright blue, which was deeply stained with a thin blush under the sunset. On the Quidditch field, the Ravenclaw team was training. Looking from here, William happened to see a fool hanging on the tail of the broom, hanging in the air, waiting pitifully for his teammates to save him. Many questions have been answered. Many new questions have arisen. But at the moment, William still has half a box of fire ash snake eggs, a reckless professor, and a half-giant who has performed miracles to be saved. My goodness. Do you know how it feels to suddenly have so many collections after waking up? Hey. Thanks for your support. Gwa. There will be no strange awakening events. William is William. Chapter 41 Painful and Sweet Investments. Hagrid's hut is not difficult to find. It is located on the path connecting the castle to the Forbidden Forest. There is a small field next to it. At this moment, there are some pumpkins and other things planted in the field. When William saw the red light flashing faintly on the window glass of Hagrid's hut from a distance, he knew that something bad must have happened. Alohomora? William walked quickly to the door, pulled out his wand and pointed it at the door lock. With a click, the wooden door of the hut opened, and billowing black smoke rushed in. Turgia, the wand quickly passed an ellipse and swept to the lower right. A powerful airflow surged, like a broom, neatly blocking the black smoke and knocking it to the ground. The sound of footsteps followed. Violet Gorgon. Get out of here. Oh, it's you, William. Come in. Hagrid's huge body appeared in the door, followed by his face, which was blackened by smoke and almost indistinguishable from his skin, hair and beard. It looks like you need a little help, William said, squeezing into the hut. The next second, he saw at least a dozen gray-black snakes crawling around in the hut, trying to get into various hidden corners. William. Knock them out, Professor Kettleburn shouted happily when he saw him appear. He was standing in the middle of the room, pointing his wand at the slithering fire ash snakes, emitting red light. Stupefied, he aimed at a fire ash snake that was about to crawl into the fireplace, shouted a spell, and a red light hit the snake's forehead. Then Hagrid strode over, grabbed the unlucky fire ash snake with his big hands, and threw it into a tin bucket in the corner of the wooden house. William finally understood how Hagrid had gotten himself covered in black ash. Damn it! The temperature here is rising again, Professor Kettleburn cursed loudly, pointed his wand into the air, and shouted, Cyto Glacio, quick freeze! A large mass of bluish-white cold air surged out from the tip of his wand and quickly dissipated in the air, but the temperature of the hut suddenly became cool again. This is undoubtedly the reason why the hut has not caught fire so far. But that's only until now. Think of a way. There are more and more of them, Hagrid shouted loudly. Ash snakes are magical creatures with a very short lifespan of only 1 hour at most. They will quickly turn into ash after laying eggs. But their eggs will also release amazing heat, and if they are not dealt with in time, they will soon hatch into more ash snakes again. I'm thinking about it, Professor Kettleburn responded loudly. The room soon became hot again. Professor, use the flying curse. After William briefly understood the situation, he shouted to Professor Kettleburn. What? Are you crazy? There are at least 24 Ashwinder here. You long worm. Stupefy, fainting, get out of here. Let go of my legs, Professor Kettleburn said, roughly kicking away an Ashwinder that wanted to lay eggs under his butt. This is a typical tactic of adding fuel to the fire. Use the Axio Ashwinder, trust me. William raised his wand and concentrated. Okay. For the sake of Merlin's long pantyhose. Axio Ashwinder flying, Professor Kettleburn raised his wand helplessly. The next second, at least 20 or 30 snakes with black scales and as long as a person's forearm flew up and pounced on Professor Kettleburn. Protego. William raised his wand and released a transparent air barrier above Professor Kettleburn's head, blocking all the Ashwinder flying towards him. Then, his wand quickly swept through the air, drawing 3 runes. A silver chain bound the 3 runes tightly, forming a triangular structure. Then William raised his wand slightly and waved it downward. Rune language. Before school started, Mr. Ollivander taught William this rune language consisting of 3 characters as a back-to-school gift and a symbol of friendship. William named it Glacier. The spring emerged from the top of William's wand, and as soon as it reached the air, it quickly cooled and turned into ice. William controlled the glacier and extinguished all the fire ash snakes surrounding Professor Kettleburn. Soon there was only a thick layer of black ash on the ground, and many snake eggs with dark red flames. Hagrid grabbed a big, scary broom and swept all the snake eggs together. Professor Kettleburn then cast a freezing spell on them. The crisis was finally resolved. Phew, for Merlin's sake, Professor Kettleburn took a long breath, and his white hair and beard turned black like Hagrid's. I thought I could control them, so I hatched one with Hagrid. It was a really energetic little guy, with beautiful scales, wasn't it? He said, first tapping himself with his wand to get rid of all the ugly black and gray, then pointing to Hagrid and tidying up his beard and hair. Yeah, it's as long as my arm. Hagrid nodded and panted. William could guess the story after that even if they didn't need to tell it. The excited Professor Kettleburn and Hagrid soon hatched more little cuties until they realized that they might not be able to control the situation. Professor, I thought we all agreed to hatch them after I came, William said helplessly. He was pointing his wand at the mess in the hut, using the vanishing spell and the cleansing spell to restore the ruins. Haha. You know. Well, I promised you half of the snake eggs in the box, but if it's the part that they hatched, Professor Kettleburn's voice became smaller and smaller as he spoke. Ahem. It must be the black smoke just now, ahem. He pretended to cough to cover up his embarrassment. But the current situation, William was also a little confused. On the positive side, his assets have achieved an exponential growth that is even more exaggerated than Bitcoin in a short period of time. The original few snake eggs have now become hundreds of them conservatively estimated. But on the bad side, William's original plan was to use the existence spell to make a small box that can keep the freezing spell constant, or in the worst case, the entire refrigerator, and throw all the snake eggs into the freezer. He remembered that the original book mentioned that behind a tree not on the trunk of the Whomping Willow, there was a secret passage leading to the Shrieking Shack in Hogsmeade. He could get a diesel generator there. Now, William was distressed. Each fire ash snake egg can be sold at a high price on the black market, because frozen snake eggs are a main material for aphrodisiacs, and the Ministry of Magic prohibits the public sale of such things for safety reasons. He was a little reluctant to destroy them all. This batch of snake eggs was really frozen by him. If he wanted to expand the scale like before, it would probably take a lot of effort. But if he left it, William had no confidence in Hagrid and Professor Kettleburn at the moment. If they were allowed to keep it, ideally, there might be a species called fire ash snake in the Forbidden Forest, but in an unideal situation, Hogwarts might lose a landscape called the Forbidden Forest. It would be nice to have a place like the Room of Requirement. William walked out of the cabin and wanted to breathe some fresh air. Not far away, the Forbidden Forest was dark. Wait. It seems that there really is such a place, thanks to Ziji Chen for the monthly ticket. The spell of the freezing spell is not in the original book. Don't ask. If you ask, it's a machine-translated Latin. No one really thinks I can speak Latin, right? Today's Two Halves update is completed. Oh my god, It has gained more than 600 favorites today. Please leave some comments or something so that I don't have to worry about reading it. Gua. Ying. Hey. Chapter 42, Make dumplings for this little vinegar. In William's opinion, a perfect place to store these snake eggs should meet at least several conditions. First, it should be spacious enough to facilitate the entry and exit of personnel and the storage of snake eggs, and it should be possible to make snake eggs into potions on the spot. Second, it should be safe enough, even if the fire ash snake eggs are accidentally hatched, it will not cause too serious consequences. Not only that, it should also be hidden enough. At least it should be enough to fool some bold Grange offender. Of course, almost all of the above conditions can be easily replaced by one condition. Even if the whole place is burned to scorched earth, it will not be distressed, and it may even make a small profit. Hagrid, do you know if there is any relatively large, open place in the Forbidden Forest that is not afraid of burning, even if it burns all over? For example, underground caves. William's hint almost gave the answer. Let me think about it. No, you are not talking about Aragog's lair. He won't agree, it's too dangerous. Hagrid flapped his hands and stammered in response. But the danger he was talking about was obviously not for wizards, but for the big eight-eyed giant spider Aragog that could eat people. When you hatched the fire ash snake in the hut just now, you didn't feel how dangerous it was. William wanted to say this. You can tell me where the nest is. I have always had a unique understanding of persuading people, especially spiders, he said sincerely. Among all insects, William hated spiders, a hairy, multi-legged creature, second only to mosquitoes. But for the eight-eyed giant spider whose venom could be worth a lot of gold galleons, he could break this position. William liked the eight-eyed giant spider too much. The half-dead kind that he could grab a venom from. William, who had read the original book, naturally knew that if he went to negotiate himself, the result would be undoubted. Aragog would reveal his true face, and he would have a reason. Really? Hagrid looked at William suspiciously. Ahem, William. There are many poisonous gases in the nest of the eight-eyed giant spider. We don't want to blow up the entire Forbidden Forest. Professor Kettleburn saved Hagrid in time. Tisk, William shook his head regretfully. But your idea does sound good. I think we can try to dig one ourselves. You know, it's not very complicated if we use blasting spells and transfiguration. Professor Kettleburn thought seriously. His idea reminded William. William also thought this idea was quite good. There was a huge nest of eight-eyed giant spiders under the Forbidden Forest, proving that the geological structure here was actually quite stable. With the power of spells, they might even be able to complete this project before winter. Although according to his original idea, after he failed to negotiate with Aragog, perhaps before Halloween, an unfortunate accidental and avoidable regrettable fire could burn the spider hole clean, and then repave the ground and walls. If the traceless extension spell was used, the scale of this underground world might be many times larger. He could dig a passage to Hogsmeade and build his own alchemy workshop here. Think about it, we can mass-produce fire ash snake eggs, make potions in the potion factory, and then sell them directly to the dealers waiting in Hogsmeade. William described his beautiful blueprint. Professor Kettleburn, think about it. No matter how many or what kind of cute little creatures you have here, you can easily and safely feed them. And Hagrid, you can come and take care of various magical creatures at any time, and there is enough bourbon and fire whiskey? Professor Kettleburn and Hagrid nodded blankly. They didn't understand yet. Just a moment ago, they were still discussing how to deal with the fire ash snake eggs. How come it turned into mass production of snake eggs and building a potion factory? To be honest, William himself didn't expect it. Although he had doubts about this, the more William thought about it, the more he felt that this was a feasible project. At least an interesting project. But William, do you know how to make them into potions? I don't think Professor Snape would be happy, but Hagrid asked with some concern. If William really dared to ask Professor Snape how to make the love potion even if he had been a good man for a long time, Snape would not hesitate to draw his wand and give him a sharp and invisible slash. The kind aimed at the carotid artery in the neck. Don't worry, Hagrid. William wanted to pat Hagrid's shoulder, but he found that he was not tall enough. So he could only pat his elbow instead and comfort him. Although William had never made a love potion, he had developed several more interesting gadgets. The effect was at least better than that of Mrs. Primpinier's beauty and magic potion shop on Diagon Alley, which was called Beauty, but its main business was to solve the problem of witches getting spots, sores and acne. Then there is only one problem left. William sighed and looked at the pile of fire ash snake eggs, how to preserve them before his cold storage was repaired. Now it seems that only one spell can solve it. Only one spell. So, if I understand correctly, you want me to agree to dig a big hole under Hogwarts to build a magical biological industry park and a potion factory? After listening to William's business plan, Professor Dumbledore adjusted his wizard hat and asked cautiously, "What made you think of such a controversial and brave thing?" He had never heard of such an outrageous request in his decades as headmaster. But the applicant was serious. "Yes, our new line club already has a mentor, and has been recognized by Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick. At least they didn't object, and ask me to come to you. Now we only lack a venue for activities, and we plan to raise funds ourselves." William smiled like an ordinary fourth-year student who wanted to establish a club. There was no reason why the Ministry of Magic could use Albus Dumbledore to fly in, but he couldn't. The name was naturally chosen by him at random. After thinking about it, he felt that at least all the rules on the surface should be met. Because only in this way can Professor Dumbledore be given space to agree to this small request. Isn't it just digging out a space as big as a Quidditch pitch under the Forbidden Forest, and stacking a dozen spells on it so that it can eventually be as high as an 8-story building? It's just a small club activity. Hogwarts requires that the club has at least 7 members when it is established. Here are our signatures. You will find that there is even one more. William took out a piece of parchment with the club's name and the signatures of official members from his shoulder bag and handed it to Professor Dumbledore. Before coming to the Arch-Headmaster's office on the 8th floor, he made some preparations. Not only did he go to Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick to ask for their permission, he also pulled Harry and the others into the chariot. In order to thank the school for its support, our club will also give 30% of the profits to the school in the form of anonymous donations without asking for anything in return. As an expression of our gratitude, William took out another card, anonymous donation, which means that the donor has no requirements on the use of the funds, which means that Dumbledore, as the headmaster of Hogwarts, can use the funds at will. Dumbledore is not an island. He has the entire Order of the Phoenix to consider. If Dumbledore had been wealthy, he would never have let Lupin live such a miserable life. Dumbledore sat up a little straighter. Mr. Buffalo, has anyone ever told you that maybe you are suitable to be a businessman? He said with a smile. William knew that the White Wizard was finally serious. Thanks to the monthly ticket of the child crying in the middle of the night. Thanks to Aspirin for the monthly ticket. Thanks to the tip from Brother Jiwang. Thanks to the tip from Ymira Flavor Rice Ball. Welcome to play in the group. Chapter 43. You will know then. Mr. Buffalo, has anyone ever told you that you might be a good fit to be a businessman? Dumbledore said with a smile. Forget it, Professor, I still prefer to be a client, you know, providing a source of goods and running my own small business. Door-to-door sales are not for me. William shook his head. To be honest, I don't see any reason to reject you, right? You are not requesting to buy or lease a piece of land, but applying for a venue for your club's activities and making some, let's use your words, minor renovations based on your activities. Dumbledore put William's business plan down, raised his teacup, and took a sip. At least in terms of procedures, you did it impeccably, he praised sincerely. Thank you. William took it without hesitation. But you know, the use of land in Hogwarts Castle, no matter how big or small, must be approved by the board of directors. I don't think your club can satisfy them. Especially considering that many of the board members present have surnames that you may not be unfamiliar with. Professor Dumbledore shook his head, showing a regretful attitude. But maybe we have some room for maneuver. The White Wizard was very sincere, but William didn't believe that he would have no way out. If Dumbledore really wanted to refuse, the reason he gave would not be so reasonable. Sometimes, I always think about whether our direct sorting method will also have certain problems. Slytherin will regret not having you, Mr. Buffalo. Dumbledore laughed loudly. I rarely see you behave like this in Ravenclaw. After being rejected, they often leave directly and then secretly set up their own things somewhere. Or rack their brains and try hard to find a reason that I can no longer refuse. The hat asked me, and I didn't agree. William also took a sip of tea. It was a little cold and still not tasty. But he knew that the deal had been made. You know, although generally speaking, Hogwarts' use of land needs to be approved by the school board. But I think if there is an honorary alumnus who generously donates a bench to the castle, the chair Dumbledore was talking about was, of course, a chair. As for the honorary alumni, William believed that Heisenberg was a good choice. As the headmaster of Hogwarts, I lent him the 10 square feet of land where the bench is located, and even the school board cannot object. The White Wizard stopped talking here. But William already understood what he meant. After that, the honorary alumnus transferred the right to use the land to a club established by a young wizard that he was very optimistic about, and the activities of this club will involve transfiguration and spells. As for why there is a hole as big as a Quidditch pitch in the 10 square feet underground? Don't ask. If you ask, it's because of a spell error during the club's activities. It was accidentally cast. Professor, it's a pity that you don't become a businessman, William praised sincerely. But William, you have to at least agree to my 2 requests before I will agree to the donation of the honorary alumnus. Dumbledore sat up straight, with both hands on the edge of the table. He lowered his head slightly and looked at William. You can also regard them as my 2 requests. Never do anything beyond your ability or without sufficient confidence. And please treat it as a real club, just like you promised me just now. Of course, Professor. William nodded in agreement. Then why don't you tell your friends about this good news? I think they must be eager to wait, right? In my impression, Hagrid has never been good at waiting. Dumbledore stood up, walked to William, and escorted him out of the office. By the way, William, if you don't mind, can you tell me how you plan to dig out this space? Even if you use blasting spells and transfiguration throughout the process, I think it is not a job that can be easily completed by a few little wizards. Before closing the door, the White Wizard asked casually honestly. Dumbledore was indeed a little curious. Of course, I blew up an oil lamp wrapped in oil paper and hidden in the sewer for 50 years, and made a wish to the spirit that appeared. Just kidding, you will know it naturally when the time comes. William made a joke that only he in the world could understand, and said goodbye to Professor Dumbledore and left, then turned around and went to the room of requirement. Before presenting his business plan, he had already consulted the White Wizard on how to properly freeze these snake eggs so that they would not lose their activity quickly, but would not burn the surrounding area to ashes. What you should do is to build a magic array that can give more magic than the rune words, and more specific rules are at the top, indicating that ice is its attribute. Then, representing delay and restriction, it is close to ice as its definition. Dumbledore waved his wand, showing the runes in the air in the form of smoke, and connected them with silver invisible chains, but unlike what William knew before, the White Wizard would adjust the meaning of each rune. It represents the 12 months of the year, and it is completely carved out and rotated around other runes. This represents eternity in the language of runes, Dumbledore explained, and after making sure William understood, he raised his wand sharply. Under Dumbledore's action, the 3 runes maintained their existing structure and were pressed into a teacup on the tray. Just put it on the ground and inject magic power. It can produce a circular frozen area. The more magic power you inject, the larger its area will be. The White Wizard handed the teacup to William and said, "What about its duration?" William played with the teacup. It seemed to be the same as other teacups from the outside, except that 3 small runes and thin shiny silver threads could be seen on the inner wall. "Oh, you will know it naturally when the time comes," Dumbledore blinked and answered. That old bee. William had to admit that Dumbledore's level of magic was amazing. He casually made a magic array that was more profound than the rune language he knew, and pasted it on the bottom of the teacup and handed it to him. "I need an empty room." He turned 3 times in front of the tapestry. A bright door appeared on the wall. At the same time, in the headmaster's office not far from him, Dumbledore sat back in the high-back chair with a tired face and took a deep breath. "If I hadn't known a little bit about ancient magic runes, I would have really thought you were as relaxed as you look just now." Phineas sneered at Dumbledore and said, "You could have just agreed to him or rejected him instead of talking about that nonsense about the board of directors. Those guys don't even dare to look you in the eye. What will they say? Who is he, a little wizard from the wild land? How dare he dig a hole under Hogwarts and do those things? If you understand, you won't be the most hated headmaster." "Phineas," another voice interrupted Phineas's long speech. He was Everard, one of the most respected headmasters in the history of Hogwarts. Dumbledore did the right thing. A female voice joined the conversation. "But I don't think it's a good idea for you to lend him that piece of land. Thanks to book friend 201907252201301111 for the monthly ticket. Thanks to book friend 201907252201301111 for the reward. Hey, can anyone guess how to dig a hole? 10 square feet is about 1 square meter." Chapter 44 Anything Goes. But I don't think it's a good idea for you to lend him that piece of land, a majestic female voice said. Thank you, Delis. Dumbledore looked up at the ceiling of the vaulted office, as if there was something unusual there. He sat up straight and got himself a cup of tea with a lot of milk and sugar. That William, he doesn't look like a fourth-year student at all. You should investigate him carefully, instead of playing house with him like you are now. He will be an unstable factor, another voice that sounded very serious said. Armando, this is not the era of decades ago. We are no longer in the Hogwarts that does not tolerate the rebellion of young people. Dumbledore shook his head and said. He shows no signs of implanted memories, nor does his soul show any signs of instability or non-nativeness, let alone being controlled by the Imperious curse. What can I do? Just because we don't understand, should we send a very innocent little wizard to Azkaban? We are not dark wizards. After receiving Nicholas Flamel's letter, Dumbledore had put William Buffalo's name into the admission book early, and was unexpectedly recognized. This meant that William Buffalo met all the conditions for freshman admission, whether it was his actual age or magical talent. Dumbledore could only turn his speculation into William being a poor unlucky little wizard who was manipulated by dark magic or had his memory distorted, and Hogwarts could provide him with shelter. When he first met William, Dumbledore wanted to find the source of those Heisenberg ideas. But even if the White Wizard used almost all the means of detection except legilimency, he did not feel any abnormality in him, unless it was absolutely necessary. Dumbledore would not use excessive means such as legilimency. Nick Flamel is very optimistic about him. He believes that he has no prejudice against Muggles and can even combine many of their discoveries and tools with alchemy and potions. To be honest, I have the same idea as him. That Heisenberg. No, it was William who reminded us to pay attention to the world of ordinary Muggles, and after I did that, I had to admit that he was right. Dumbledore hesitated for a moment before continuing. We haven't seen changes for too long. But we need change more than ever. Then you should at least warn him and admonish him, so that he understands the rules of Hogwarts, instead of letting him do whatever he wants at the moment. This has never happened in the history of Hogwarts. He should spend his energy and talent on studying, instead of playing some ridiculous magic cave tricks with a half-giant and that Kettleburn. Armando frowned. Armando, Hagrid is a friend. His kindness and loyalty are always worthy of my trust. Sylvanus is just more straightforward. Besides, what is the reason? You know, everything William has done so far is in accordance with the rules, except for that night walk. Maybe I can punish him to be locked up. Dumbledore raised his voice. William has shown his respect for the rules and others, and his curiosity about magic is also from the heart. Do we have to force him to hide all his edges and act like he thought of a name? The White Wizard did not say it. Armando did but did not argue any more. Armando, we should support the current headmaster. Delis interrupted their conversation. Treat him fairly and teach him wholeheartedly, just like we would respect any little wizard who comes to Hogwarts. Maybe we will find a surprise. The White Wizard seemed to answer her, but also seemed to be talking to himself. Somewhere not far from the Arch-Headmaster's office. Old B, please translate for me what surprise means. It's freezing cold. William walked quickly to the corner of the room and carefully put away the fire ash snake egg in his hand. This was the last one. Stimulated by the cold, the flickering fire on the surface of the snake egg also dimmed. At this moment, it really looked like an ordinary black snake egg. The empty room transformed by the room of requirement was now covered with ice and snow. The effect of this teacup was much greater than William expected. After injecting a lot of magic power, it formed a magic circle that could cover the entire room, which could emit cold wind and quickly lower the temperature here. But its effect was not only that. When passing through this area, the effect of any spell, including that attached to items, would be greatly weakened. If William had not reacted quickly enough, the 553 in his shoulder bag would have fallen to the ground. It can only mean that the restrictions have taken effect, William guessed, and he slammed the door of the room of requirement. The door disappeared, and William, who walked out of the room of requirement, finally felt a warmth flowing through his robes into his body again. Gurgle, his stomach gave an ominous warning. Because it took too much time to find Harry and his friends to sign, to convince Dumbledore, and to stack the snake eggs in the room of requirement, before he knew it, it was already late at night. But it's just right. William recalled the little secret that Tom, the owner of the Leaky Cauldron, told him during the holiday. He went down the magic staircase, walked along the marble steps to the entrance hall, turned left, and entered a very wide stone corridor. There was a painting of a silver bowl full of fruit. Tickle the pear in the painting, he did it. The pear laughed and cracked, and then the crack opened wider and wider, and a large green handle popped out. William pulled the handle to the bottom and pushed it open. The first thing that caught his eye was 4 long tables. They were exactly the same as the ones in the Great Hall. I guess the house elves usually use them to make food appear in the Great Hall. Dozens of house elves with yellow-green skin, short stature, and only wearing tattered clothes were wandering in the kitchen. When they heard the door open, they looked over. The appearance of the wizard obviously surprised the house elves in the kitchen. They gathered together, and one who looked like the leader stood up. "Welcome, Mr. Wizard." He lowered his head, raised his hands, and said in a shrill voice, "My name is Lalo. What can I do for you, sir?" "Sir, anything is fine. Can you help me prepare some food?" William asked. Although he had seen this scene in novels, this was the first time he experienced it after coming here. North America also has house elves, but their status is much higher. Not only can they wear gorgeous clothes, but they can also work as employees in wizards' shops. Of course, hearing William's words, the house elf Lalo shuddered all over, and an exaggerated, almost funny smile broke out on his face. Thanks to the book friend 20190520213155590 for the monthly ticket. Thanks to Halen Shimon Jinj for the reward. Armando Diput is the former headmaster. When Dumbledore was the professor of transfiguration, he was the one who managed Hogwarts. He has always been known for his strict style. During his tenure, he successfully pitted Newt, fired Hagrid, and raised the second Dark Devil. I feel it is unlikely that Dumbledore has no opinion on him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 45 William's Friend. After waiting for only about 10 minutes, the house elf served William a feast. A fried artichoke with cheese sauce as an appetizer, followed by a pork pie that was almost overflowing with stuffing and tightly wrapped in butter puff pastry, and mashed potatoes with deep red thick gravy as the side dish. Afterwards, a Yorkshire pudding with a strong aroma of gravy was served on the table as a dessert after the meal. Although British cuisine is often considered dark and difficult to swallow, of course William has no special opinion on Tom, the owner of the Leaky Cauldron. He has to admit that the recipes of the house elves at Hogwarts are really worthy of praise. "Lalo, how much do I have to pay to dig you away from Hogwarts and work for me?" Enjoying a lemon sorbet, William gave a heartfelt compliment. After the sumptuous dinner, he almost forgot the original purpose of coming to the kitchen. Mr. Buffalo, our house elves have been serving the wizards of Hogwarts for generations since the school was founded, Lalo answered fearfully but proudly. "Okay," William just asked casually. Sherbet made him sober up from his post-meal laziness. "It's time to get down to business. Your house elves can leave Hogwarts Castle, right? I mean, if you don't have anything else to do." William was a little uncertain. The last time he read the original book was a long time ago, but he had the impression that house elves didn't necessarily have to stay where they worked. "Yes, Mr. Buffalo, of course we can leave the castle. But why should we do this? This is our home, and there are many wizards who need our service." Lalo's eyes widened even wider. Small head, big eyes. Full of countless confusions. "Then suppose that I can ask you to leave the castle and help me do something outside? For example, let me think, buy something, pick someone up or something," William asked sincerely. In his dumpling plan, getting the help of this group of house elves is crucial. Dumpling does not simply mean digging a big hole in that 10-square-foot area, and then hollowing them out with countless blasting and transformation spells. He wants to build a factory underground. Waterproofing, load-bearing structure, safe passage and other factors must be fully considered, otherwise even if he relies on magic to barely complete this work, maybe one day when he wakes up, his factory will collapse inexplicably. These are naturally not problems that William can solve. Fortunately, as a traverser born in the United States, William is least lacking in the currency of the ordinary world. For the sake of Merlin's garter stockings, it is now 1991, and many of the stocks that will rise to the sky in the future are now lying dormant. This rule states that we can only serve the little wizards in the castle. "I don't know, sir. I don't think we should do this," Lalo answered hesitantly. as if it was very difficult for him to refuse a wizard's request, but agreeing to William would undoubtedly violate their rules. Then, let's change the hypothesis. I ask Professor Dumbledore, and get his permission, to entrust Hogwarts with a job that needs to leave the castle, and you help me complete it. William has his own interpretation of the rules. It seems as if we shouldn't. But, Lalo was also confused by William's long hypothesis. He clasped his 10 fingers tightly, trying to find flaws in William's words. Lalo was a smart house elf. He knew that there was no substantial difference between the little wizard's words before and after. But Lalo was not smart enough. At least not smart enough to find William's problem. Then you have to bring Professor Dumbledore's signature. You have to ask him to let us help you. The signatures of other professors are not acceptable, the house elf answered dejectedly. For the first time in his life, he felt that satisfying a wizard's request would be such a thing that made him unhappy. Of course, William answered with satisfaction. Limited to the provisions of the International Act of Wizarding Secrecy in 1689, wizards cannot actively inform ordinary people of the existence of magic. Any magic performed in front of them will be detected by the Ministry of Magic. In serious cases, wizards may even have their wands broken and be expelled from school. However, there are too many loopholes to exploit. The first step of the dumplings is completed. William, who is in a better mood, asked the elves for another serving of ice cream and stood up to leave the kitchen. This is really a wonderful night. Eat. Pear's faint laughter suddenly rang again. That old dog Filch, we just put a big dung egg, and he actually, a voice that William was somewhat familiar with sounded. With the sound of the heavy wooden door being opened, 2 little wizards in Gryffindor robes appeared at the door of the kitchen, one with red hair and the other with red hair. They also saw William enjoying his ice cream. Look, George, what did we find? Said one of the red-haired boys. Judging from his words, it should be Fred. They look too much alike, and William is a grown man, so he has no interest in observing the subtle differences between the 2 grown men up close. Potion Prince, North American genius, old bat nemesis. He actually violated the school rules and came to the kitchen late at night. George stretched out his voice, exaggerating like a tenor singing an aria. How sad Percy will be, and he also taught us, you should be as good as that buffalo, don't hang around all day and embarrass Gryffindor. Fred cooperated with George and said with a wink. There is no prohibition in the school rules to go to the kitchen, right? It's just that most of them don't know where the kitchen is, and, strictly speaking, I didn't break the school rules. William calmly appreciated the twins' performance. Frankly speaking, it was quite interesting. If they were to perform comedy, they would be good at it. Filch didn't find me, did he? I think if I wasn't found, I didn't break the school rules. Returning the empty plate to the house elf, William replied, unless one of you 2 can report me now. But I can guarantee that even if that happens, I still won't break the school rules. Look, I said he was one of us. Let me formally introduce myself. I'm Fred. Fred walked over with a smile and extended his right hand enthusiastically. William stood up and shook hands with him. I'm George. You are our friend now. George also smiled and shook hands with William, and then nudged his shoulder with his elbow. Speaking of which, my friends, are you 2 interested in making a deal? William smiled gently. This night is getting better and better. Thanks to the monthly ticket of the pearl that fell from the sky. Thanks to Liuba Ini Upi for the tip. House elves can also be detected when they cast magic. Dobby blew up the cake in the 2nd year. But the Ministry of Magic can't detect who cast the magic, but only knows that someone used it in Harry's home. The elves leaving the school is a patch, otherwise all little wizards can let house elves run back and forth, and they still need hammer owls. Chapter 46 The Complete Weasley Brothers. Speaking of which, my friends, are you 2 interested in making a deal? William made a suggestion. Sure, why not? Fred sat down next to him, while George went to find the group of excited house elves and asked them for some food and drinks. I believe you must know this castle very well. You should also be familiar with the secret passages and secret doors in the castle, William said tactfully. He was not sure when the 2 brothers got the Marauders map, and even if he knew, he couldn't ask directly. Brother, do you have the Marauders map? Of course. When it comes to knowing more about Hogwarts, I dare say there is no one who knows more than us, Fred answered proudly. Maybe Professor Dumbledore should be counted. George came back with a basket of snacks and said casually. Well, maybe he should be counted. If you want to know which floor of the castle has a secret passage, I think we still have some say. Fred grabbed a sour bread and took a bite. What I want to know is how to get out of the castle, to Hogsmeade Village, for example. William said. He wanted to eat a tempting-looking ladyfingers, but he was too full and had to give up the idea. Friend William, this is against school rules. Fred narrowed his eyes and looked at George. We are only allowed to go to that village on certain weekends, and we must be inspected by that annoying old Filch. His nose is always sniffing. George pushed the bread basket a little further away and sat next to William, sandwiching him in the middle. But don't you? Although William knew that Hogwarts had several secret passages leading to Hogsmeade, he didn't know the specific locations and passwords of other secret passages except the Whomping Willow. Please allow us to show you, good friend of the night traveler. Fred took out a piece of parchment that looked tattered from his pocket, put it on the long table in front of them, and smoothed the corners with both hands. George took out his wand and pressed it lightly on it. I solemnly swear that I have no ill intentions. George whispered the command. A thin line of ink, like the silk thread of a spider web, suddenly appeared from the tip of his wand, and then it became more and more. These lines merged and crossed each other, extending to every corner of the parchment. Curved green characters appeared at the top. Mr. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs, auxiliary suppliers of magical mischief makers, proudly present to you the Marauder's map. It was the thing William had seen in the original book. William saw on the map that Dumbledore was at the end of the corridor on the 4th floor, Filch was on the 2nd floor with his skinny cat named Mrs. Norris, and Quirrell was wandering in the hallway. It was a pity that there was no Tom Riddle written in small letters on the back of his head, or should it be Voldemort? William has always been curious about this question. Friend William, in order to obtain it, we paid too much price in the past, Fred said with a pretended sigh. That's a really long story, when we were in the first year, we always had a strong curiosity and endless energy, George sighed. So can we skip the middle of the story and go straight to the end? William interrupted their show. Okay, William friend. We got this map from Filch. Fred spread his hands helplessly. George stood up and pointed his wand to several places on the map one by one. As far as we know, there are 7 passages leading to Hogsmeade. These 4 are known to Filch, and they may have been blocked by him. The one behind the mirror on the 5th floor is very practical. We have been using it all the time. It leads directly to the outside of Madame Pavlovna's coffee shop. And this one, it's behind the Whomping Willow. Only crazy or stupid people will take it, Fred added, and by the way, he accidentally mentioned his opinion of someone who seriously considered taking this route. You might like this one. It's behind a hunchbacked old woman statue on the 4th floor corridor. It leads directly to the cellar of Honeydukes. If you buy something there and return the same way, no one will even know that you have been to Hogsmeade. You will find that old Ed in the store is a very enthusiastic guy. George pointed out another way for William. He winked. Thank you, this is very useful. William carefully memorized the location of these passages and the corresponding passwords, thanked the 2 brothers, and prepared to return a small favor to them. I noticed that you are often discovered by Filch when you take a walk at night. Yes, Filch is an old dog. He always follows our scent and lingers, and his cat, George echoed. I can teach you a spell, if you are interested, the disillusionment charm. You will find it particularly useful when you are wandering at night. William snapped his fingers, and the next second, in the eyes of the twins, his whole body seemed to have inexplicably become a part of this chair. Merlin's pullover, Fred and George said in a daze. William carefully taught them the spells and movements of the disillusionment charm, as well as some precautions for use, and made sure that they could at least turn themselves into a semi-transparent appearance. All you need to do next is practice more. Finally, after watching the 2 brothers try it, William said with satisfaction, he bet that they were never as serious as they were when they were in Professor Flitwick's spell class. As for the cat, the disillusionment charm can't cover up the smell on your body, and I'm not sure if you will appear abnormal in the cat's vision. William thought for a while and came up with a very reasonable plan. If he couldn't solve the problem, then he could always choose to solve the person who raised the problem, or the cat. Silentio. He drew a circle in the air with his wand, pointed it outward, and pointed it at Fred. A beam of almost transparent gray shot out and hit his chest. William saw Fred open his mouth to say something, but when it reached his ears, it became a sound much smaller than the buzzing of a mosquito. Finite, William waved his wand and cancelled the effect of the spell. When the wand is directed outward, the spell will act on the person hit, making his voice almost inaudible, and when the wand is directed inward, a barrier will be created nearby. The sound within this barrier will almost never be transmitted to the outside world. This spell has a very significant effect in wizard duels, especially when the opponent is not used to using silent spells. Friend William, you must teach us this spell. Fred and George put their arms around William's shoulders, sandwiched him tightly, and said sincerely, they seemed to have seen a bright future after mastering these two spells. They could wander around the castle at will, and even walk under the nose of Filch, the old dog, without being discovered. From now on, they will truly become complete. Why not? William replied with a smile. He and Filch are not familiar with each other. Thanks to the Blues Elf for the monthly ticket. Thanks to the old bookworm Daybreak for the monthly ticket. I can't do anything about the foreshadowing of dumplings in these few chapters. After all, there has to be a process to introduce the following. The next step is the first meeting with Quirrell, the wizard duel, the dumpling making process, and other things. Please read it again. It is almost 500 now and I want to advance. Also, the secret passage on the 5th floor mentioned by the two brothers in the original text was destroyed last winter, which means it is still there at this time. As for the location of the exit, it is set by yourself. Chapter 47. She should give students more trust. After teaching them the little spell and getting a promise to help Jyozi when the time comes, William returned to the Ravenclaw Tower. What kind of weather is the worst for mice? Griffic asked. When it rains heavily, William gave the answer. Correct answer. Griffic made a slight sound and was about to flip the door over to let William in. Wait, Griffic, let me ask you a question too. If you can't answer it either, can you stop asking questions to stop me from going in? William called Griffic. He was just going to give it a try, but he didn't expect the door, which had been halfway open, to suddenly get stuck and then turn back. You asked the question, the gentlewoman said. What should I ask? William hesitated a little. Griffic was so frank that he gave up the idea of using advanced mathematics, linear algebra and the like to embarrass her. He had an idea. Let's assume there is a ship called Theseus. The ship has been sailing on the sea for a long time, and every time a plank breaks, the crew will replace it. Finally, one day, all the parts of the ship have been replaced at least once. So is it still the same Theseus? William asked a question. This is a classic philosophical discussion. Griffic said nothing. If it is, but it no longer has any of the original planks, but if it is not, then from when did it stop being that ship? William slowly added the last knife. He waited quietly, and after a long while, Griffic suddenly turned around without saying a word and opened the door to the common room for William. What came into view directly was an oval brown and white cat worm. Gable was lying on the crown of the unfortunate marble Ravenclaw statue, with its big tail and half of its butt facing the door. Sorry, he didn't mean it. William walked over, took Gabe down from the statue's head, and whispered to the statue, which looked aggrieved and about to cry. Gib also snorted in his sleep, as if he agreed with him. He lay down on the bed. Hit the ball. Tactically stop the opponent's chaser. Damn quaffle, Jimmy muttered meaninglessly. The evening breeze hit the window. William also fell asleep. The night passed quickly. To be honest, even though William had prepared himself for a busy day, he still realized that his preparation was for the ghost to see. He got up early and started writing letters, one by one at first, and later Penelope, who was still confused, and Jimmy, a hard worker who had just finished training, joined in and used magic to copy a large number of letters with the same content. Professor Dumbledore readily agreed to William's request to borrow the house elves, although in Dumbledore's mind, William wanted to borrow them to use the vanishing charm to help him speed up the digging process. These letters are for architects, these are for equipment dealers, these are for shops that sell potions, and these are for magazine editors. Do you remember them all? And Lalo, you have to go to Gringotts first, where you should be able to find a phone number. According to my number, you can ask the goblins to help call. If they don't want to, gold galleons will always work. William handed the prepared letters and some gold and silver coins to Lalo and several other house elves, and carefully told them over and over again. For Merlin's sake, the house elves felt that their heads, which were not small to begin with, had become even bigger. You go contact this guy named Scott. Don't tell him anything about magic. If he dares not to agree, threaten to sell all your stocks. William gave the important task of helping to find a British architect to his stockbroker. Although he was in New York, there were always some acquaintances in the city who could help. After arranging all this, William walked to the herbology classroom on time. Mr. Buffalo, "I was worried that you were lost," Professor Sprout said to him kindly. The head of Hufflepuff wore a tattered and patched hat, her hair was wild and flamboyant, her nails were full of dirt, but her kind smile made people feel good at first sight. She led them through the relatively safe greenhouses in front and walked to a position close to the middle. In this class, William and his classmates, led by Professor Sprout, learned about a plant called Barbotuber, in a very unpleasant way. Rather than saying that the Barbotuber is a plant, it is better to say that it is a large black slug that emerges from the soil. They have been wriggling slightly, and there are many large shiny bulges on their bodies. For Merlin's sake, Penelope put on dragon leather gloves and muttered to herself. William dared to swear that her whole body was shaking when she reached out to the bulges filled with liquid. But it must be said that squeezing these bulges hard, watching them explode and ooze pus, made William feel very subtle and somewhat embarrassing. They spent the whole class squeezing these bulges and collecting the yellow-green liquid that flowed out of the broken bulges, which exuded a pungent gasoline smell. Look on the bright side, at least the pus of these Barbotubers can be used to make potions, and you can also use it to treat stubborn. It's nothing. After class, Jimmy took a long breath and said. His voice became smaller and smaller because Penelope was staring at him with an extremely dangerous look. You think I would need it? Penelope lowered her head slightly, looking at the unfortunate Jimmy, until he swallowed the rest of his unfinished words back into his throat, and shook his head desperately. Penelope, of course you don't need those things, but Professor Sprout should also give her students a little more trust. She acts as if I can do anything, William said indignantly. When they passed the first few greenhouses after class, Sprout's eyes were fixed on him, as if staring at a sneaky thief. Professor Sprout will certainly trust the students, she is the head of Hufflepuff. But William, you shouldn't have mentioned to her that you want to pick some herbs to taste. Penelope glanced at him. I was told that these herbs will taste quite good if they are handled properly. The person William was referring to was naturally a senior. As they were talking, they had already passed through the entrance hall and came to the auditorium. Most of the students had already arrived, sitting around the long table, waiting for lunch to appear. Professor Quirrell's defense against the dark arts class is very special. To be honest, I really didn't expect him to know so much about defense against the dark arts, and his adventures. Behind them, at the long table of Gryffindor, a dark-skinned girl was excitedly talking about the class she had just finished in the morning. But her words confused William. Defense against the dark arts class, Professor Quirrell, adventures, understand, he knew every word, but when they were put together, it seemed to tell a very bizarre story. It's a pity that we don't have the defense against the dark arts class until tomorrow. The Muggle studies taught by Professor Quirrell last year was very unique, I have to say, Penelope said with some regret. An owl suddenly flew in from outside the hallway and landed on William's desk. Thanks to Bam for the monthly ticket. Thanks to Louis Chen for the monthly ticket. Chapter 48, Date or Meeting. Compared to the previous striped-bellied chick that almost choked, this eagle owl was in much better condition. It raised its head and made a coo sound in its throat, urging William to untie the small note tied to its leg, and its round eyes turned straight to the table. This round-faced fat chicken seemed to be studying what to eat on the table after delivering the letter. Thank you. William found some peanuts on the table and handed them to it. He took the note and unfolded it on the table. The note was not long. After dinner, I will wait for you in the secret passage behind the portrait of Sister Shipton in the east corridor on the 5th floor of the castle. The password is talk nonsense. The italic words written in emerald green ink were very delicate. This was obviously a girl's handwriting. Date. Penelope, who was sitting next to him, drank a big sip of pumpkin juice with interest. She glanced at William, looking like she was watching the fun and not minding the trouble. William did not keep the content of the note secret, so she could naturally see it. Date. Jimmy heard the sensitive word and leaned over to take a look. But before he could get close, William had already put the note away. Rather than a date, it's more of a meeting. I guess it's that Gemma Farley, she wants to discuss with me about Professor Flitwick's club, William said in a low voice. He turned slightly sideways and saw Gemma Farley sitting in front of the Slytherin table. She almost instantly noticed William's gaze and nodded to him slightly. She must have some special purpose for being so secretive. Those Slytherins are always like this. They like to spend time on unnecessary calculations and are unwilling to do what they should do most, study magic. Penelope curled her lips. She has never been interested in this form of conspiracy. Maybe, but I don't mind helping her and making things difficult for them. And how should I put it, I am also a little curious about her. William did not comment. He was very interested in the so-called third eye. Compared to the busy Tuesday, William's Wednesday suddenly became much more relaxed. He spent the whole afternoon in the library, looking for a few French books to study. He wanted to decipher the manuscript that Nicholas Flamel gave him as soon as possible. Not surprisingly, William met Hermione again. Hermione came after the first class in the afternoon, and her brown hair looked messier than the last time they met. She was carrying a heavy school bag, and it made a dull thump sound when it landed on the table. Luminous, luminescent flicker, wrist should be up first, then forward. The counter spell is Nox, which can extinguish the light. She sat behind the table, pulled out a book standard spells, elementary from her school bag, opened it to a page, and whispered in her mouth, and her right hand kept waving the wand. It seemed that she had just finished a spell class, and Professor Flitwick taught them the very basic spell of Loomis. No, the professor said it was clearly not like this. Hermione scratched her hair anxiously. Ahem, Hermione. If I were you, I would focus more on the coherence between waving the wand and shouting the spell, rather than demanding that I do exactly what the professor says and what the textbook requires, William said softly, lowering his throat. Oh. Sorry, William. I didn't see you here. Hermione looked up in surprise. Look. Loomis. William took out his wand, drew a circle casually, and shouted a spell at the same time. A silver ball of light emitting a steady light appeared at the top of the wand. This is a library, you shouldn't use spells, Hermione frowned and said in a low voice, but how did you do it? You just drew a circle casually. Professor Flitwick clearly said that we should, Maxima. William shouted the spell in a low voice, and the light at the top of his wand suddenly became brighter, even a little dazzling. But the light only lasted for a moment, and before the administrator Madame Pants noticed it, it quickly dimmed again. We are wizards, aren't we? William waved his wand and extinguished the light ball. If you want a spell to really work, it doesn't mean you have to do it exactly like the professor does, but you must be confident enough to believe that your spell will definitely have the effect you want it to have. What William said was exactly what he was more and more convinced of. And what Hermione lacked at this moment was precisely this confidence. Thank you for your reminder. But I still think that we must do it as the professor said. Otherwise, Hermione scratched her hair in distress. You still have several years to learn. William was not in a hurry to get Hermione on the right path. Even he himself, after a long time, gradually realized this. Spells are always just spells, but different wizards use them, which ultimately determines the effect of the spell. He stayed in the library until the evening, and after dinner, he went to the east corridor on the 5th floor of the castle. William stood in front of a portrait of a nun with an abstract realistic style and shouted the command nonsense. The nun chuckled and revealed the room hidden behind her. This was a long, oval, somewhat shabby empty room with a thick layer of bright red velvet carpet on the floor. There were many shelves around the room, on which were piled various sundries, cups, books, wooden boxes, crystal balls. Several shabby tables and chairs were scattered on the floor, and the crystal chandelier above the head emitted a somewhat dim light. It's a very suitable room for duels, isn't it? A long time ago, this was the venue for the Prophecy Club, but later the number of students who were really interested in this course became fewer and fewer. And among the few remaining members, most of the wizards who could see something later chose to betray their fate. Not many people here know about it. Slytherin's head girl, Gemma Farley, stood in the middle of the room and said to William, who walked into the room. She stood straight. Her already tall figure, now under the light of the room, looked even more majestic. She seemed to be standing in the center of the world. She was radiant. You seem to be well prepared. William nodded and walked towards her, while Gemma began to step back, leaving about 30 steps between them. They took out their wands, raised their arms to protect their left chests, and bowed to each other. They strictly followed the etiquette of wizard duels. Expelliarmus, the red light shot out from Gemma Farley's wand first. It was a silent spell, and the speed was amazing. She had blatantly chosen to seize the initiative. Sorry for the late update, I had a game in the evening, and I just had time to come back to adjust the saved content and post it. The next chapter will be at 11 o'clock. Thank you for the reward and monthly ticket and put it in that chapter. Chapter 49 Duel. Expelliarmus, red light first shot out from Gemma Farley's wand. Expelliarmus is a very practical spell. It requires almost no magic power and is released very quickly, making it very suitable for testing. Protego, An invisible barrier suddenly appeared. The red light hit it. The barrier stirred up invisible waves. Impedimenta. William shook his wand lightly, canceling the effect of Protego, and then quickly drew a curve, pointing at Gemma, shouting a spell. A red light shot out and flew towards her. Protego Maxima. Facing the red light, Gemma adopted a defensive countermeasure. The transparent air barrier appeared in front of her relatively slowly, but in time, compared with William's wall-like Protego spell, it was more like an oval shield. Smaller area, in exchange for stronger defense. William's red spell beam hit the armor spell, causing it to tremble violently. The impact had not yet subsided. The second red light had already caught up. The third red light followed. Using multiple spells at the same time, unreasonably breaking the opponent's hastily built defense, this is one of William's best tactics in Ilvermorny. The armor spell that Gemma Farley erected shook violently under the impact, and it changed from its original translucent state to blurry and chaotic, and many cracks appeared in its originally smooth surface. But it still held up. Although it was extremely reluctant, it still held up. Interesting, William thought. With such a strong armor spell, wizards need to spend more magic power and time to condense it. If it is just to resist an ordinary evil curse attack, it is obviously too extravagant. But Gemma changed the shape of the armor spell and enhanced its local strength, easily blocking his wave of attacks, and bought enough time to prepare the next spell. Almost at the next moment when the armor spell broke, an extremely strong red light suddenly penetrated it and shot straight at William. Reducto, crushed to pieces, Gemma shouted the spell loudly. Crushed to pieces is an extremely powerful spell. But this attack was not enough to make William panic. Avis, flock of birds, William shook his wand, and a group of black balls quickly burst out from the top of his wand and shot into the air. They turned into a large number of birds and crashed straight into the red beam. Under the spell of crushing to pieces, the birds disappeared, leaving only large bunches of black or yellow feathers slowly falling. These feathers formed a wall, blocking the vision of both sides. Excellent transfiguration, Gemma praised William loudly. While carefully changing his position, William slowed down the speed of crushing to pieces through the flock of birds, allowing him to easily dodge. At the same time, the large number of feathers produced by the spell can effectively conceal his figure, blocking her original plan to launch a pursuit. Nebula, cloud cover, Gemma chanted the spell and waved her wand. She needed to find a way to help her fight back, or at least turn the situation around, enough to resolve William's next wave of attacks. Large groups of gray water vapor mist were released, hiding her figure in it. Quietly, Gemma's eyes had turned into terrifying pure black, with almost no white in her eyes. "Let me see where you are," Gemma whispered to herself. But where she looked, she didn't find William's figure at all. How is it possible? No, it's up there. Inspiration suddenly burst out in her mind. She noticed William's position. He was close to the ceiling, and in front of him, an extremely extraordinary magic power was being quickly condensed. William is ready to go. Protego Maxima, armor protection, Gemma shouted the spell loudly. The translucent silver barrier protected her from behind. The next moment, countless icicles shot out from the top of William's wand, like an ice dragon, smashing down unreasonably. Gemma Farley undoubtedly misjudged William's attack method. She originally thought that William would choose a powerful spell, such as Shattered, Flying Sand and Rocks, but she had never seen a rune word like Glacier. William also squandered his magic without hesitation. The icicles shot from the top of the wand constantly hit Gemma's armor spell, forcing her to concentrate on barely maintaining it. More icicles shot behind Gemma, not only exposing her position hidden in the mist, but also blocking her possibility of further movement. Through a simple floating spell, William dodged Gemma's carefully planned attack, and seized the high ground, gaining a short-term initiative. In a tug-of-war, the active party often has the advantage. "I give up," Gemma shouted out loudly soon. She waved her wand, and the gray-white water vapor disappeared. "For the sake of Merlin's riding boots. You are cheating," Gemma pointed at the icicles on the ground and said, "How did you do it? Don't tell me that you used the spring of water, the transfiguration spell or the freezing spell to turn them into ice, and then used the volley to shit them out," she asked in disbelief. "You didn't foresee my 3 spells in advance, so you just happened to use the armor spell to deal with them, didn't you?" William shrugged, and he also waved his wand, turning all the icicles left on the ground into nothing, and used the repair spell to restore the carpet that had been riddled with holes. Just as Gemma guessed, The runeword Glacier is actually equivalent to 3 spells, a combination of 3 steps. Rather than saying it is a spell, it is better to say that it is a sentence realized by magic. It is more accurate to say that it is the magic of phrases. Although William has always found it difficult to exert the power of the more offensive black magic, the wonderful spell method of the runeword has greatly made up for his shortcomings. Other wizards may feel that runewords are useless because they cannot control multiple spells at the same time, but this is exactly what William is best at. I am more looking forward to next week now. A gleam flashed in Gemma's eyes. She pulled up a relatively intact table, found 2 chairs, waved her wand, and shook off the dust that was a finger thick on the top. She sat on one of the chairs. First, let's talk about your third eye. William dragged another chair, walked around the table, and sat opposite her. Well, actually, I don't know it very well myself. Even the name of the third eye is a name I found in the textbook of prophecy, and I'm not sure if it is the so-called third eye. You know, I don't actually see the future. Gemma Farley sighed, sat back at the table, and recalled with her right hand on her chin. You know the magic riot, which is when wizards first awaken their magic. It happened to me twice. Twice? William repeated. Logically, this is absolutely impossible to happen. The magic riot is the out-of-control performance that occurs when the magic in the young wizard begins to awaken. Yes, it was about the winter 5 years ago. That night, I suddenly heard a voice. Gemma nodded and explained. Winter 5 years ago? William asked. Yes, it was the day after Christmas. It rained heavily that day and it was very cold. I heard a voice at night and woke up suddenly. The strange thing is that even if I try hard to recall, I can't remember what the voice sounded like. I just remember that it seemed very magnificent. After that, I began to see things. Gemma looked at William in confusion at first, not knowing why he seemed to pay special attention to this time, but still explained patiently. Seeing things, yes. At first I thought it was an illusion or something, but later I found that it was a strange talent. I can see the flow of magic. She nodded. If you are interested, I can show it to you, Gemma said very frankly. Thank you for Aspirin's reward. Thank you for the reward from Zhuzi who loves reading books. Thanks to Louis Chen for the monthly ticket. Thanks to Roaring Mountain and Sea for the monthly ticket. Thanks to Aspirin for the monthly ticket. Today is 2/2. The editor informed me that the recommended new books and webpage new books will be promoted next week. I really appreciate your support. Please read it, don't keep it, it is really very important to the author. Chapter 50, Invitation from 7th 8. If you are interested, I can show it to you, Gemma said very frankly. William did not doubt the authenticity of her story, because she was not the only wizard who heard the so-called guidance or revelation in her dream. In a world where magic exists, this is hardly a rare thing. Nicholas Flamel claimed that an angel had come to his dream. It was the angel who told Nicholas Flamel that he would receive a magical book soon. He must study hard and understand it thoroughly, so that he could gain extraordinary and amazing power from it. It's just that this time seems to be a coincidence. It's a coincidence. Do you know memory magic? Are you willing to share your memory with me? William asked in surprise. In movies and novels, he saw Dumbledore taking Harry into the Pensieve many times to experience what happened in the past, but when William really started to come into contact with magic, he found that it was not the case at all. Unlike the subconscious, the structure of wizards' memories is intricate, yet delicate and fragile like glassware, and cannot withstand any major disturbances, whether it is an invasion like legilimency or a protection like occlumency. Even after repeated practice, only a small number of wizards can safely extract their own memories, let alone go a step further and modify or steal other people's memories like Lockhart. Of course not. Do you think I'm crazy? Gemma looked at William unhappily. But I can draw it for you. She tapped the table with her wand, summoned a broken crystal ball, and transformed it into a piece of drawing paper. Gemma put her wand on a corner of the drawing paper. The glimmering threads made of silver ink slowly flowed out, gradually forming a vague ball of light whose shape could not be specifically defined. In my eyes, although the magic power of most wizards looks like a blurry white halo, some people have special performances, she said and tapped her wand. The silver ink turned into gold, and the originally blurry light seemed to turn into a flowing river. This is Professor McGonagall. Gemma kept adjusting the picture to show William the wizards with unique performances. Professor Flitwick, whose magic power was bright silver and changed his shape flexibly, and Professor Snape, who was pure black and almost unchanged as a tetrahedron. Not only professors, but also some young wizards have unique performances of magic, but perhaps because they have not had enough opportunities, they only show some superficial manifestations, such as clearer outlines than others, or light colors. Professor Dumbledore's magic power is too strong. He is like a sun, people dare not look directly at him. But Professor Quirrell, very strange. Gemma was hesitant to speak when she talked about Professor Quirrell. Well, if you must know, although his magic power looks like an ordinary ball, without any performance, I always have a feeling. It's like, when I look at him, he actually sees me. William could only roughly guess, but perhaps her judgment could be more confident. When she stared at the back of Professor Quirrell's head, the back of Professor Quirrell's head was indeed staring at her, and he might even make a face at her. If the 1/7 Dark Lord had that interest. What about mine? William asked curiously. Your magic power. Gemma bit her lip and put the magic wand against the drawing paper. Countless, dense light silver lines rushed out, like a surging river, filling every corner of the entire drawing paper. Like a net. William wanted to say this, but he saw that in the center of the drawing paper, the particularly bright lines formed an elliptical sphere, which was undulating in a wonderful rhythm. Like a cocoon, Gemma said softly, I don't know what this means, but I know that you are definitely not an ordinary little wizard. Even if you are temporarily now, you will definitely not be in the future. Is this why you chose to find me? William said, tapping the drawing paper with his wand, making all the content on it disappear. Slytherin will help you reach the peak, Gemma said, the motto of Slytherin. At this moment, it represents two layers of meaning. I still don't understand why you choose to put your chips on the table so early. Isn't the duel club a more appropriate time? William asked his question. Because Dolittle Yaxley has already begun to range against you. I heard that he is contacting other official members and wants them to go all out when challenging, so that you have to withdraw in disgrace. You know, in the eyes of some people, the surname Yaxley may still represent something, Gemma answered frankly. Of course, I also want to see if there is a chance for us to cooperate and make him embarrassed in front of everyone. Only by defeating him can I have a chance to go further in the college, otherwise his annoying hooked nose will always want to show its role. But what good will this do me? William shook his head. Maybe that Drit Yaxley is very strong, or maybe Professor Flitwick's challenge will be difficult, but I can always find a way to deal with it. But if I cooperate with you, the contradiction between me and Slytherin, at least a vast majority of Slytherin, will intensify. At that time, they will not dare to provoke you, but tacitly start to busy themselves with other things. But I can understand your concerns. If you want something in exchange, as long as I can find it, Gemma is too smart. In just a moment, she understood William's thoughts. Of course it's knowledge of spells, knowledge of ancient magic runes, knowledge of alchemy. I believe that your college is not lacking in these things, right? Even if you don't have it yourself, you will know which families with similar surnames can find similar information. William expressed his thoughts. I'm not asking you to bring it to me, but to help me reach some deals. As a middleman, you will naturally gain friendship and rewards from both sides. If those precious research records or materials are still preserved, then the most likely possibility is that they are stored in the homes of pure-blood wizards of the so-called Sacred 28 clans. Compared to William, who is a despicable outsider, Gemma Farley is obviously a better choice. Although she is not liked by many Slytherins, those who are liked by other Slytherins and may cooperate with William are either too stupid or arrogant, or simply have no idea of the value of knowledge. Then happy cooperation. William took Gemma's hand and shook it gently with her. Then they spent a little time and agreed to meet at least twice before next week's event to discuss how to deal with the club's challenges. If possible, it would be best to give them a surprise. See you next time we meet. After saying goodbye to William, Gemma walked towards the Slytherin common room in the basement. William was also going to go back to his dormitory in Ravenclaw Tower to rest. Tomorrow there is a very important ancient magic class, and he doesn't want to be in a bad state in class due to lack of sleep. But William didn't expect that when he walked down the stairs from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor, he met 7 out of 8 people. Quirinus Quirrell, the professor of defense against the dark arts with a small piece of Voldemort on the back of his head, who was holding a pot of tea and walking upstairs. Ah, Mr. Buffalo, I was wondering if I could have a chance to meet you before class so that I can understand the progress of your defense against the dark arts class. Why don't you come to my office and have a cup of tea so that we can have a good chat? Completely different from what was mentioned in the movie, Professor Quirrell, who didn't stutter at all, smiled and made an invitation. It's a patch. Because there has never been a clear level and system for the power in HP, I personally think that it actually exists, but it is not exposed. There is a reasonable explanation for why Professor Quirrell doesn't stutter. Don't rush to say I'm OK. Sevenths is equal to 1 plus 1/7. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.